In the cotton textile industry, a group of laborers were on strike because of the bad labor conditions. They were asking for a 10-day Labor Day and equal conditions with men. The owner of the factory ordered to close the building down for women to abandon ship. A little bit later, there was a huge fire that ended the life of 129 women. As a homage to their lives and as a protest for the impairing inequalities, during the second conference of socialist women, they officially proclaimed March 8th as the International Day of Working Women. It wasn't until after 1977, during the general meeting of the United Nations, that they officially signed March 8th as the International Day of Women. And today, 114 days after that day, CAF, Development Bank of Latin America, acknowledges the need to deepen the efforts to reach gender equality and commits to support the countries in the definition and implementation of public policies for equality. Women represent slightly over half the population in Latin America and the Caribbean, and many of them face challenges and difficulties due to their gender. Without having gotten to equality yet, the women and girls of the region have obstacles that limit their work with unpaid work, and there's still gender disparities in their participation in several areas of life. How to face these challenges effectively and how to generate public policies that are efficient to promote equal opportunity and empowering of women. CAF Development Bank of Latin America presents its CAF Strategy for Gender Equality 2022-2026. More equality, more inclusion, in a space for reflection on the challenges of the region from the leadership of women, because gender equality is a human right. CAF Development Bank of Latin America. How are you? Good morning. Good morning to all the women for the International Day of Women. It's a pleasure to say hello to you, to greet you again in this second day of the Development Bank of Latin America, CAF, in the presentation of strategy for gender equality that takes place in Asunción during the International Day of Women and the CAF Board, a summer the general meeting. Today, we are with important figures to reflect on the challenges to reach gender equality, empowering women and their participation in decision-making and leadership roles in Latin America and the Caribbean. We invite you to share your opinions, experiences through our social networks, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Agenda CAF with the hashtag Mujeres Sin Barreras and hashtag Género CAF. And obviously, please follow our accounts. Please subscribe. I want to remind you that we are live in Guarani, in Spanish, sign language, Portuguese, all of this in English, obviously, and through our webpage, caf.com, and also our YouTube channel. We will now begin this event, calling to stage Mr. Sergio Díaz Granados, who's Executive President of CAF, Mr. Oscar Llamosa, the Minister of Industry and Trade, Ms. Azucena Arbeleche, Economy and Finance of Uruguay, and Mr. Euclides Acevedo, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Paraguay.
Bienvenidos y bienvenidas.
Welcome. Next, we will have the words of Sergio Díaz-Granados, Executive President of CAF. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to address the Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Oscar de Mozas, President and Minister of the Treasury. And I also want to say hello to the Minister of Uruguay, members of the board of CAF, Executive Vice President Carolina España, Cristina Cineri, Corporate Vice President of CAF, our General Secretary, Leandra Claros, ambassadors, members of the diplomatic corps that is accredited here in Paraguay, Anita, who's with us, and currently she's the joint Deputy Secretary of ONU Mujeres, ONU Women, and our Manager of Inclusion, Allardi, and the members of the executive and the panelists that have traveled here, the Governor of Rio Negro. Please be welcome, and I also want to thank you for your relevant presence to reaffirm our commitment with the promotion of Latin America and the Caribbean of opportunities for our women and our girls. At CAF, we have the development theory, and we understand that for sustainable development in the region, we must work with and for everyone who is part of the society without any type of discrimination, guaranteeing the access to opportunities. That is why a day like today, we are relaunching this framework of our strategy, through which we define our roadmap from here to 2026 to support the countries in their equality policies, and of course, to guarantee that our work does meet the needs of women and girls, to remove the obstacles and the barriers that they face in their rights in society. We are aware in CAF that there will not be full development if there still are inequalities in different groups of society with regards to acknowledgement and rights and the access to goods and services, the exercise of autonomy. And throughout the years, CAF has worked in favor of equality. What we do today, we've redoubled this effort. We place our bets on gender equality, on inclusion and diversity, highlighting the support that we have in our countries. After December, the board approved the largest increment of capital in the history of CAF. That strategy includes that one of the guidelines for our operations from here to 2030, there is a transversal factor that is inclusion, promotion of diversity in Latin America. After July 1st, when I officially presented my CV for the presidency of CAF, I also committed to increase the presence of women in the board of CAF. Now I'm pleased to say that we have moved forward in this objective. We have gone from 7% of women in the board to 32%. I want to thank these 6 months. I want to thank Carolina España, the Executive Vice President of CAF, for all the great effort and commitment that they have dedicated in these months to build this possibility. Together with what we have done of approving the capital in December, because that strategy has to have an impact on the structure that we've created. We've created the management of inclusion and biodiversity that will be led and is being led by Ana Maria Vallardi from Paraguay. And under her leadership, we will work hard on gender issues. And she'll be based in the region. And in regards to gender challenges, the biggest one that Latin America has is in the sustainable equality. And therefore, we have to eliminate gender gaps. This will be our opportunity to highlight the key aspect of our strategy that is based on autonomy, financial autonomy, physical autonomy, and decision-making autonomy for girls and women in Latin America and the Caribbean. I also want to move forward thanking ONU Women for having been with us since last September in New York. We signed with ONU Mujeres an agreement to measure and gauge the impact of our organization with regards to gender diversity and inclusion. Today, March 8th, we also honor this historic fight. I want to end thanking the different allies that have been working with us, and especially at Conmebol last Sunday, when we decided to use sports as a tool for social transformation in Latin America for gender biodiversity and exclusion. Thank you, everyone, for participating today, and especially the members of our board for supporting us. And because after this event, we will go to the discussions of the CAF action from here to 2026. Thank you very much. Thank you, President, for your words. Next, Minister of the Treasury, Oscar Llamosas, who will give a few words. Good morning, everyone. I'm trying to. I'm reading the question in the chat box. Okay. He's greeting everyone, the Foreign Affairs Minister, and everyone who is part of CAF, and the staff, the special guests, and everyone that is joining us through social media. It is a great honor and pleasure to be part of the strategy for gender equality of CAF. And today is such a special day because we're actually celebrating the International Day of Women. So I want to congratulate all of the women who are here on their day. It's an honor, a pleasure to honor you in this big step that is confirmed today. Gender equality is not just a fundamental right, but it is the groundwork to build a more equal society and a more fair society. There have been huge steps in the last years, but we are aware that the gap is still there, and that makes our commitment stronger, encouraging us to have action mechanisms that will encourage the road that we have paved. The advances that there have been to empower women and girls has been important, but the situation of the pandemics has created a crisis that has not only weakened the situation of the world, but has also had a strong social impact. That is why our challenge as policymakers is key to find the road and to destroy the obstacles in the middle so that equality can be the backbone of our society. A few days ago, on Sunday, we were celebrating the football female leagues with the award of wonderful athletes who are promising and future leaders of our society. I think it is opportune to mention how wonderful it was to have been part of this, that every medal that was handed over, every acknowledgement, and the dedication shown by these girls has been wonderful. They have given the first important step towards inclusion of women. So I want to acknowledge the importance of these policies that are present in the CAF agenda to empower women, to empower girls that today are obviously, we can see the great work that they've done. This agenda has the full support of Paraguay as member of the board. So therefore, we have the commitment of working hard on all the lines of action that are set in this strategy within the work that I'm doing. This pillar, as well as others, in this agenda is important progress. And in that sense, we also want to mention that we feel proud that a Paraguayan woman, Ana, can lead this process and that she will do it the best way possible. This agenda allows the creation of more spaces and platforms for social transformation, for a more fair society. Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister Oscar Llamosas. Next, Susana Velecha. She's the Minister of Finances of Uruguay, for her to share a few words. Good morning to everyone. It is a great pleasure to participate. Today, women in Latin America have gone a long way, but there is still a long road ahead, as we saw in the video of the introduction. There still are salary gaps, there still are hurdles in the access of the same roles in the companies, in the government, in our society, and there still are differences in the sharing of tasks and taking care of the domestic tasks, chores. In the Ministry of Finance of Uruguay, we have taken gender policy as something that is a part of all of the public policies of the government. We are also supporting, in a very concrete way, we're supporting institutions or different parts of the government that have to give a clear, immediate answer, because we're not talking about a theory, we are talking about something that requires the full support of the government and the society in the day-to-day. That is why we have invested in bracelets, ankle bracelets, to prevent social violence. We have foreseen a place to have people who need to shelters. We're investing in ways to prevent gender violence. We are working to provide clear answers in situations that we see on a day-to-day basis. On the other hand, I'm pleased to say that it is the right time in which the Ministry of Economy and Finances in Uruguay has the largest number of women in decision-making roles, women that had access to this place for their technical profile. Finally, I think that on this road ahead that we have, in order to reach this equality of opportunities, what we have to do, each of us, from wherever we are, is a true cultural change. A cultural change in which equal opportunities has to be what is the new normal. It has to be, as we said in the video, the respect of a human right, and not more, not less. It is that cultural change that will lead all of us to enjoy a society that is more plural, more fair, and more free. Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister, for your words. Now, Foreign Affairs Minister Euclides Acevedo.
Muy buenos días.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I want to say something to the authorities of CAF, because they stole a brilliant staff member that I had. They stole her from me, but I will forgive them, because this is a wonderful approach for the role of women in the development of the nations. Everyone that proposes a sort of state policy speak of peace, development, democracy, human rights, climate change, and sometimes, if possible, inclusion policy. And I think that the CAF was very on point to incorporate the role of women in the challenge that they have, which is making the bank not only a sort of it has got economic hygiene, but it also is great for regional integration. There will be no integration. There will be no prosperity in Latin America if women doesn't have a full role. We are used to big words, to wonderful memories, but very few times do we commit, as CAF has done now, in taking an active role and taking leadership of really working for inclusion. I think, my dear Ana, that the challenge is large, but you faced the Ministry of Women. You were at the forefront of the Ministry of Women in a country that is not inclusive still, as is ours, have shown that the risks are never large. So, my dear President and Vice President, first of all, thank you. Even though I'm upset that you took my wonderful staff member away, I am happy that you gave her an opportunity to cooperate with this huge challenge. And today, which is the Day of Women, I want to say to the Paraguayan women, who I really do love, because I'm the son of an emancipated woman. I'm the son of a single mom who had to face exclusion. And she gave me the energy so that I could understand from within the huge challenge of our times. That the fight for equality, for freedom, we've already shown during the dictatorship. But today, the fight is for equality. And that is the deep sense of feminism. And that is why I ask the female women of Paraguay, take charge of politics. Nobody will give you equality. You have to earn it. You have to rescue it. And that fight will have victims. Don't think that it will be easy, my dear President. Yes, we will have a lot of money, we'll have a lot of infrastructure and grids and electric grids and networks for all of the things that are part of the progress of a nation. But it is important to have the content of women so that effectively Paraguay can be free and at the same time egalitarian. Have a great day. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, ministro Euclides Acevedo, por sus palabras. Antes de proceder a la presentación de la estrategia, queremos agradecer y enviarle un saludo a la ministra de la Mujer de Paraguay, la señora Celina Esther Lescano, quien por motivos de agenda no pudo asistir, pero que celebra este importante paso de la CAF del empoderamiento de la mujer. Asimismo, saludamos a la señora...
We want to greet Sima Sameba, who's Executive Director of ONU Women, because the increase of humane operations within and outside Ukraine has requested her full cooperation, and we were not able to have her with us this morning. We also want to thank the words of those that were with us in this session, and we invite you to go to your seats. Meanwhile, I want to remind you that we are live on social networks, Agenda CAF, and you can also share your experiences and opinions with the hashtag Women Without Barriers and Género CAF. Twitter and Instagram, I think we've got over 1,100 people connected to this event today. Now, we will present this CAF strategy for gender equality. In charge of Ana Maria Vallardi, she's the manager of diversion of CAF. Ana Maria was Minister of Women between 2013 and 2018. She worked as an ambassador of Paraguay in Peru and Italy. She was also part of the delegation in the 4th Conference of Women in Beijing. But before she does her presentation, we will show you a video on the strategy. The principle of gender equality acknowledges the diversity of people. Therefore, women, men, girls, boys, and people with diverse identities are subject to the same rights, responsibilities, and opportunities. But at the same time, We acknowledge their interests. The entrance with regards to the framework and the biggest challenge of Latin America and the Caribbean is in achieving a substantial equality, because there still are gaps that limit the autonomy of women. Most of adult women don't have their own money, their own income. For every 100 poor men, there are 113 poor women. Most women have suffered some type of violence from their partner or another person. 13 countries are in the region have the highest rate of feminicide in the region. The region has the second highest teenage pregnancy in the world, while only 28.5% of the ministries are occupied by women. And the roles at the region is 36%. CAF, in order to contribute with the most inclusive development for Latin America, presents the CAF Strategy for Gender Equality 2022-2026. The document is sustained on the principle of gender equality and the commitments for equality in multiple agreements and international treaties. The CAF Strategy for Gender Equality has as a purpose to contribute to the equal opportunities and the empowerment of women from a perspective through the support of public policies of equality and the transversality of gender in the different services. In order to reach her services, the institution will be based on 3 axes: economic autonomy, physical autonomy, autonomy in decision making. All of this in order to add to the goals of sustainable development, especially SDG 5, gender equality and empowering all women and girls. Through this strategy, CAF acknowledges that gender equality is a human right that must be promoted and protected. It is committed to support the countries in the implementation of the public policies of equality according to what is assigned in their agreement. And it is aligned with the principle of leaving no one behind, which is part of the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development. CAF, Development Bank of Latin America.
Muy buenos días.
Good morning. As we have seen in the video that was just shown, reaching real equality in the region is still a challenge, and it involves the private sector and the public sector, the organizations, the NGOs, the civil society, the different multilateral bodies. In summary, it is a responsibility that we all have. In CAF, we are convinced that sustainable development will only be possible with the participation of everyone who makes part of the society in equal conditions. Therefore, we bet on a more equal society, a more inclusive society where opportunities for development will be effective for everyone. How will we do it? How will we make this happen? We will focus our efforts and actions to empower women and girls in the 3 situations that we've mentioned. And we want autonomous economy, and a physical autonomy, and decision-making autonomy. With regards to economical autonomy, we know that for women to be fully autonomous, they have to be able to make their own money, they have to be able to manage their own money, and their empowerment has to be facilitated. So we have 3 areas that we'll give priority to. First, the access to resources, which includes facilitating the access of women to financing and credits and improving their financial conditions, strengthen the development from a gender perspective and the productivity of the companies led by women. We want to encourage labor policies that will promote the conciliation between work and family, that will also contribute to reduce the segregation, the occupational segregation of women. We want to close the digital gap so that more women can participate in the technologies sector, in the IT. About the uses and services, in the first place, we will support the definition and implementation of integral systems of services that will allow the reduction of the work overload that is not paid for, that is faced mainly, or that mainly women do, and that is a real barrier for a larger insertion in the labor market. Next, considering that CAF supports the countries in supporting the coverage and improving the quality of basic services, we will promote the transversality in the water, sanitation, education, health, infrastructure, and others. Climate change. Women, because of the gender roles and inequalities that exist, are more vulnerable with regards to climate change. So we want to encourage their capacities for the access to natural resources and the implementation of mitigation or adaptation to climate change, and to encourage their effective participation in those spaces and decision-making to fight this. Physical autonomy. Sadly, the region still has huge challenges to fight gender violence. That's why we understand that assigning financial resources has to go hand in hand with public policies to prevent and fight this. On the other hand, teenage pregnancy is a huge obstacle for the full development of adolescence. It is associated with deficiencies in health, the health of the young girls and the children. There's a negative impact in their education and labor opportunities. The LGBT people also have more conditions they're more vulnerable to violence, to prejudgment and stereotypes. Through the financing of projects and programs in the operations of the technical cooperation of the generation and sharing of knowledge and the support to public policies, CAF can play a key role in the fight and diminishing gender inequality and in fighting teenage pregnancy. We will support the governments in the design, financing, and implementing of legal frameworks, public policies, and/or action plans to prevent, sanction, and eradicate violence against girls and women, implementing public policies in the prevention of teenage pregnancy, and to prevent and sanction abuse and harassment against the LGBT population, especially in the public spaces. The third autonomy, decision-making. Our purpose here resides in contributing to the elimination of the barriers or obstacles that impede women to have equal access to decision-making spaces. CAF will promote actions to contribute to more leadership on behalf of women and the effective participation of decision-making spaces in the public sector and in the private sector. Therefore, we will seek that the executive units that CAF promotes will promote the participation and representation of women in certain spaces, promoting actions to strengthen the women in their leadership roles, conflict resolution, teamwork, and for negotiations. Consolidate the participation of the mechanisms of women and for the organizations of women in decision-making, and to strengthen their capacities in the coordination amongst the institutions. We want to develop alliances with other organisms to manage and to contribute to the leadership of women and their effective participation in decision-making spaces. How will we do this? The implementation of this strategy will be done from two perspectives. One that is external, that is connected with the countries, and one that is internal with the transformations of our culture, our labor culture. From the external perspective, this strategy will support the countries in their gender equality policies through the support and the definition and implementation to strengthen the capacities of the state and keeping good communication with the government authorities in order to see what their priorities are for equality. Likewise, we will talk about the gender in the external areas of CAF through the strengthening of the structuring teams and project administration, aligning the framework on the strategic documents with the strategy for gender equality. We will set alliances and dialogue spaces for a better response to the challenges of gender inequality. From an internal perspective, we'll focus the efforts with an institutional diagnosis. We will have a protocol when there is harassment situations, be it at work or sexual harassment, implementing processes to certify the institution in gender and diversity, and developing activities for the prevention of discrimination in order to generate a corporate entourage that is free of discrimination and violence based on equality and diversity. Taking into account the constant evolution of these issues, and in order for the strategy to be on board and according to the requirements, there will be periodical revisions and constant revisions. Implementing the strategies for gender equality, CAF bets on nobody staying behind. And as we have said over and over again, ladies and gentlemen, equality is a human right. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, señora Ana María Vallardi, por esta.
Thank you, Ana María Vallardi, for this presentation. In order to share some final reflections, we will have Anita Batia, who will talk to us online, Executive Director, Uno Mujeres.
Es un honor para mí participar.
Good morning. It is an honor for me to participate in this important event of CAF. I would like to thank you for your invitation and taking part of this event, and I want to take this space to congratulate all of the women that are here on the International Day of Women. I'm in Dubai right now. For us in UN Women, it was important to participate in this event and to share with you my reflections. Before I begin with my words, I would like to greet our colleagues from CAF. Sergio Díaz-Granados, who's Executive President of CAF. Cristiana Sinelli, Vice President, Corporate Vice President of Strategic Programming. And Ana María Vallardi, who's the Manager of Inclusion, Gender and Diversity. And all of the members of the board of CAF who are with us today. I also want to greet the ministers who are with us in the panel. Azucena de Leche, Minister of Economy and Finances of Uruguay. Euclides Acevedo, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Paraguay. And Celina Esther Lescano, Minister of Women of Paraguay. I understand she was not able to make it for her agenda, because of her agenda. I want to highlight before I begin the enthusiasm of UN Women in order to work together with CAF to implement the 4 areas of collaboration that we recently set in the MOU that was signed in February in favor of gender equality and the empowering of women. UN Women is the only entity in the whole multilateral system globally that has a focus on gender, will be a partner, a strategic partner of CAF to lead the activities that are related to their strategy in order to really work on gender equality inside CAF as with their clients of the public sector and the private sector. We feel honored to work with CAF in this important issue and on such an important mission. Financial entities such as CAF can definitely make the great difference when they encourage or when they work on policies and projects in favor of women. As you know, inequality, gender inequality in general, and gender equality are some of the main challenges that we still have in the world. In order to achieve sustainable, it's important to work on gender. In that sense, we think it is very important to support the strategy for gender equality of CAF. UN Women collaborated with CAF in the past. Our alliance has been renewed, and it is focused on products that are very concrete and practical for a financial entity, such as promoting the investment with the lens of the gender lens that support the economic recovery within the context of COVID-19, generating knowledge, data, analysis on the impact, economic impact and social impact on women. Number two, the acknowledgement of the main counterparts of CAF that are innovating or promoting projects in favor of women and girls. That also has to be broadened, the knowledge of these projects. For this, UN Women will make available to CAF our tools, our international tools, such as the evaluations, gender evaluations that we call, the gender swap, the web or women empowerment principles to empower women that will give us a fast and efficient diagnosis of the space or the room for improvement and transformation that can be encouraged by CAF internally and in the instruments of the financing instruments. And we believe that CAF can play an important role, a very important role, in the promotion of gender equality within and from the organizations of the financial ecosystem that is most broad. In 2021, we launched the main principles to promote the investment with a gender lens in the framework of the initiative Investors for Equality. So we also believe that it is interesting to invite into CAF and the member states to support this initiative. To put the MOU into practice, the MOU that we just signed, we are making available to CAF a team of people in New York and in the region that will work together with CAF to provide technical advisory in each of the targets. UN Women seeks to continue being a strategic partner of CAF in this important process, and we hope that with this work, CAF can become a model that can be replicated and replicable in other regions of the world and by the other financial entities. I also want to highlight that I think it is fundamental the fact that the board of CAF is giving priority to this issue and it is supporting this important topic. A sample of this is the meeting that it is having today to launch its equality strategy. I bid you farewell, congratulating CAF again, its board, the team, and the executive president for the launch of this gender equality strategy. And I hope that your conversations, your internal conversations, can identify goals and indicators that are concrete in which we hope to support you whenever we, in brief. From Dubai, I say goodbye and I greet you and I congratulate everyone.
Agradecemos a Nicolás, quien
We thank you for connecting from Dubai. Thank you very much. Next, we will have the words of Cristiana Sinelli, his Corporate VP of Strategic Programming of CAF. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here presenting the gender strategy in the framework of the board of CAF. I greet all the authorities of Paraguay that are with us. Obviously, the president of CAF, who has encouraged this important event and has placed at the highest instance of governance of our institutions this gender and equality and inclusion management that we are presenting today. And I want to congratulate Anna for the presentation in such an important day. Obviously, this strategy shows the commitment that the institutions have to support the member states of CAF in working on the design and the financing of the gender policies to empower women and girls. These are initiatives that, as the CAF president was saying, have already been developing in the different countries such as Costa Rica, Argentina, Panama, Colombia, Venezuela, through a series of important activities. But today, we are relaunching and reinforcing. And this commitment was supporting the countries to prevent gender violence and to implement integrated systems of care and improving the access of women to financing is within the framework of these three autonomies that Anna was mentioning when she presented the strategy. Obviously, we're also defining a roadmap in a broader map in inclusion and diversity, where we will be working to generate more inclusion in inequality, in diversity, and racial issues, because we consider that in a certain way, this is the road ahead to generate a space of more inclusive development and more sustainable from CAF. Just to wrap up, we will continue working to build the opportunities and work on the needs that our member nations have so that this can be a stronger strategy for development in Latin America and the Caribbean. I want to congratulate Anna and Sergio for their leadership, and I want to thank the governors, the mayors who have come to participate and take part of the conversation that will come now. I congratulate the CAF team that has created this strategy with Anna and the whole team. Now we will have time for implementation of the strategy, time to generate impact in millions of girls and women of Latin America and the Caribbean. So the challenge is huge. I congratulate you, and let's all go forward. Thank you.
Gracias, señor Cristian Asinelli. Vamos a llamar.
Thank you, Cristian Asinelli. We want everyone up to the stage, Mr. Díaz Granados, Mr. Llamosas, Mr. Aveleche, Acevedo, and the vice, just for a group picture. We know you have a lot of things to do afterwards, so let's very quickly come to stage and make sure that this pictures taken for the future.
Muchas gracias a las autoridades por su participación. A continuación, invitamos a las
Thank you. Next, we will have a 10-minute coffee break before we continue the conversations for the second part of the day. And those of you that are following through the social media, we will leave you with some reflections of the different women of the region about the celebration of the International Day of Women. We will see you back in brief.
El principal reto de las mujeres de América Latina y el Caribe es liberarse de la sobrecarga de labores del cuidado que no son remuneradas. Según ONU Mujeres, las mujeres realizan 2,5 veces más trabajo no remunerado que sus parejas, como cuidar hijos, cocinar o limpiar. Esto, si bien se calcula que representa entre el 10 y el 30% del Producto Interno Bruto, para las mujeres que lo hacen gratuitamente, solo implica mayor vulnerabilidad a ser violentadas e invisibilizadas. Por eso los gobiernos y organizaciones como la CAF deben trabajar en crear un sistema eficaz de servicios del cuidado que esté al alcance del bolsillo de las familias para que se genere empleo formal para las mujeres que tienen esta experticia y vocación y para que otras liberen tiempo para poder dedicarse a desarrollar sus talentos y obtener ingresos. Muy importante trabajar también en vincular en esto a los hombres para que desempeñen con mayor detalle y convicción los roles del cuidado que por lo demás funcionan para lograr relaciones más armoniosas con las personas de su entorno.
Mi nombre es Patricia Hualinga, soy de la Amazonía de Ecuador y me dedico a defender la naturaleza, el territorio, los derechos de los pueblos indígenas y los derechos de las mujeres indígenas. Las mujeres hemos afrontado múltiples inconveniencias, retos, y uno es la violencia intrafamiliar de la que somos víctimas. Y la otra cuestión a la que hemos afrontado es a la invisibilización en las entidades. No importa si son organizaciones indígenas o si son instituciones públicas. Las mujeres no son reconocidas, no tienen su propia vocería. Creo que hay que empezar a hermanarnos, a escucharnos entre nosotras para hacer estrategias regionales de cambios profundos. Tal vez nos separan las distancias geográficas, pero no los problemas. Tenemos los mismos problemas a los que tenemos que afrontar. El reto principal de las mujeres en la región es que nos reconozcan como lo que somos, lideresas, voceras, dueñas de su propio destino.
Graças à luta do movimento de mulheres, movimento organizado, a gente conseguiu avançar em vários pontos na agenda de direito das mulheres. Os índices que nós temos de feminicídio, de estupro, de exploração de meninas no trabalho infantil, do casamento precoce, esses índices apontam que a gente tem muito a avançar ainda. E há muitos desafios envolvidos justamente porque falar de machismo, racismo, LGBTfobia é falar de sistemas de opressão que estruturam e organizam a sociedade. Primeiro a gente precisa entender que só é possível mudar essas condições que submetem as mulheres a todo tipo de violência com políticas públicas, com a ação do Estado, uma ação consistente, com investimento, com intencionalidade, que garanta, por exemplo, às mulheres acesso ao emprego, acesso à renda, que garanta às mulheres a possibilidade de profissionalização, de educação formal. Se a gente quer mudar um problema que é estrutural e constitui a base histórica do nosso país e da América Latina, a gente precisa investir em educação. Educação de meninos e meninas para que as novas gerações possam mudar essa cultura. A gente precisa também de educação para que desde já as mulheres possam ter uma vida livre de violência.
En América Latina, la planificación y diseño de infraestructura de las ciudades ha girado alrededor del automóvil. En nuestra región, una de las más urbanizadas del mundo, las comunidades vulnerables, en donde están sobrerepresentadas las mujeres y niñas, o se sitúan lejos de donde se encuentran los empleos, el comercio y las oportunidades de educación, o viven en zonas deficientes de acceso de transporte público de calidad. Es importante diseñar o rediseñar el transporte desde la visión de la movilidad cotidiana, de la movilidad cuidadora, pero también es importante el diseño de forma que beneficie a todas las personas sin discriminación y sin dejar atrás a grupos usualmente excluidos. Esto se logra preguntándonos para quién estamos diseñando el transporte y cómo debemos implementar estos cambios. Las mujeres embarazadas, niñas, niños, adultos mayores y personas con discapacidad, y en general personas que realizan tareas de cuidado, se ven desproporcionalmente afectados por sistemas deficientes de transporte. No solo porque no tienen los recursos para viajar o para moverse, sino también porque cuentan con menos recursos monetarios y de tiempo para poder hacerlo. Para poder tener ciudades más inclusivas, tenemos que repensar la movilidad desde el lente de género. Tenemos que diseñar ciudades con el concepto de proximidad, con mejor cobertura de servicio, de transporte público, que no se enfoque solo en el empleo formal, sino también en el trabajo no remunerado, en acceso a escuelas, a centros de salud, a lugares de ocio, con una infraestructura diseñada para caminar, para andar en bici, con buena cobertura de las nuevas tecnologías digitales, para planificar viajes para aquellos que no se pueden mover. Las ciudades necesitan nuevas formas de asegurarse de que todas las personas, sin importar su género, su edad, su nivel de ingresos, su etnia o su discapacidad, tengan satisfechas sus necesidades de transporte en una forma segura y sostenible con el medio ambiente.
A pesar de los notables avances educativos que niñas y mujeres de América Latina han experimentado en los últimos años, esto no se ha visto reflejado en mejores remuneraciones ni en mayor autonomía económica. Una de cada 4 mujeres no cuenta con ingresos monetarios propios y de cada 10 trabajadores apenas 4 son mujeres. Las mujeres dedican más tiempo a las tareas de cuidado y a la crianza de los hijos. Y si bien son mayoría en las universidades, no lo son en el campo del saber asociado a la innovación, en donde se perciben mejores salarios. Si queremos hablar de una verdadera igualdad de género, esto debe cambiar. Una mayor autonomía económica necesita una mejor oferta de servicios de cuidado y educación a la primera infancia, así como expandir las licencias parentales que permitan una mayor equidad en las tareas de cuidado. Necesitamos sistemas educativos que eliminen los estereotipos que discriminan y profundizan las desigualdades de género. Debemos trabajar para que cada vez haya más mujeres en profesiones vinculadas a la innovación y la tecnología, que les permitan aprovechar las oportunidades de la cuarta revolución industrial.
Alrededor de 160 millones de mujeres en América Latina no tienen una cuenta bancaria. Las mujeres enfrentan barreras más severas que los hombres a la inclusión financiera. Por ejemplo, muchas mujeres no tienen autonomía en la toma de decisiones financieras en sus propios hogares. Además, tienden a ahorrar menos, ya que tienen menores oportunidades laborales debido a su mayor participación en el sector informal y en tareas domésticas no remuneradas. También tienen menor acceso a dispositivos digitales, así como menores niveles de educación financiera y digital. Para reducir estas brechas de género y aumentar la inclusión financiera digital de las mujeres en la región, debemos impulsar la incorporación de la perspectiva de género en las estrategias nacionales de inclusión financiera y apoyar a las instituciones financieras para que diseñen productos y programas de educación financiera dirigidos a cubrir las necesidades de los diferentes segmentos de las mujeres para mejorar su bienestar financiero.
Los impactos del cambio climático nos afectan a todas las personas de diferente manera. Sin embargo, las desigualdades de género y los roles sociales ponen a las mujeres y niñas en una situación de mayor vulnerabilidad a los efectos negativos de estos fenómenos climáticos. E incluso puede profundizar estas brechas, afectando aún más sus medios de vida, bienes y salud. A nivel mundial, desastres naturales como las sequías, las inundaciones y las tormentas se cobran la vida de un número mayor de mujeres que de hombres. A su vez, las mujeres, sobre todo en zonas rurales, campesinas e indígenas, tienen un papel clave en sus comunidades para contribuir a la mitigación y combate del cambio climático. Por esto, es fundamental visibilizar y concientizar sobre la interconexión entre el cambio climático y el bienestar y la seguridad de las mujeres y las niñas, para poder definir acciones y medidas de mitigación y adaptación a estos fenómenos que garanticen en igualdad de condiciones a los hombres, que las mujeres sean al mismo tiempo beneficiarias y agentes del cambio hacia un desarrollo más inclusivo y sostenible.
La mujer en las últimas décadas, tanto a nivel global como regional, tuvimos muchos avances en materia normativa, en igualdad de derechos. Sin embargo, estos avances son aún insuficientes para hablar o para tener una igualdad de oportunidades que sea real y sustantiva. Hay que fortalecer las capacidades, las habilidades, las competencias para el liderazgo femenino y fomentar su participación dentro de los espacios de decisión. En la CAF estamos comprometidos con el desarrollo sostenible de América Latina y el Caribe. Ese desarrollo debe darse en igualdad de oportunidades y favorables para el empoderamiento de las mujeres y las niñas. Disponer de una estrategia de igualdad de género nos permite definir una acción más oportuna a los desafíos que tiene la región para superar las brechas de género que dificultan el desarrollo más inclusivo. La estrategia para la igualdad de género y la incorporación de la perspectiva de género en nuestro quehacer institucional nos permite que el financiamiento, la cooperación técnica y la gestión de conocimiento que brindamos a nuestros países tengan en cuenta la diversidad de las personas, sus intereses y necesidades y buscar soluciones de tal manera que nadie quede atrás, especialmente las mujeres y las niñas.
Las mujeres latinoamericanas hemos recorrido un amplio proceso en la búsqueda de la igualdad de oportunidades y derechos que todo ser humano merece, pero todavía falta un largo camino por recorrer. En el Ministerio de Economía y Finanzas de Uruguay hemos incorporado la política de género transversalmente en todas nuestras políticas y a su vez tratamos de apoyar a las instituciones que están en territorio, acompañando a las mujeres que lo necesitan en el día a día. Por otra parte, en este momento, el Ministerio de Economía y Finanzas creo que es la vez que tiene más mujeres en cargos de decisión, mujeres que están en este lugar por su idoneidad técnica. Creo que cada uno, desde el lugar que ocupa en la sociedad, debemos de trabajar por un verdadero cambio cultural que haga que la igualdad de oportunidades sea lo normal. Es ese cambio cultural el que nos va a permitir disfrutar a todos de una sociedad más plural, más justa y más libre.
Como mujeres asumimos esta propuesta histórica y política como un camino de transformaciones estructurales. Planteamos una lucha permanente contra toda forma de opresión, contra toda forma de discriminación, contra toda forma de explotación. Consideramos que la educación es el pilar fundamental para la transformación, la educación que se da desde la primera instancia en los hogares, desde los sistemas educativos formales y no formales. Y consideramos que asimismo debemos seguir avanzando y trabajando para cerrar brechas digitales de género en este tiempo donde lo digital está permeando nuestras vidas. Tenemos que lograr que cada vez haya más mujeres y niñas con estudios, con igualdad de oportunidades, con acceso al empleo, donde las juventudes juegan también un rol determinante. Hace falta la construcción de estadísticas y estudios específicos donde podamos contar con datos en lo que hace a toda la problemática específica de las mujeres. Eso es algo que falta para la toma de decisiones en espacios regionales. La CAF juega un rol fundamental en el desarrollo integral de nuestros pueblos, en el desarrollo integral de nuestros estados y en seguir profundizando los lazos de integración, los lazos de solidaridad y los lazos de cooperación para un crecimiento económico con justicia social.
Hoy, 8 de marzo, tenemos la oportunidad de conmemorar un gran día para empoderar a las mujeres y defender nuestros derechos. Y quiero hacerlo resaltando el papel que tenemos aquellas que ocupamos espacios dedicados a la toma de decisiones. Hoy tenemos la posibilidad de promover a mujeres capaces para liderar procesos decisivos en entidades como el Departamento Nacional de Planeación, el cual encabezo en este momento y donde el 54% de los cargos directivos están ocupados por mujeres. Y es que ¿quién mejor que nosotras para incentivar a mujeres en cargos de liderazgo y así contribuir a cerrar brechas salariales, laborales y de ascensos para conseguir una sociedad más equitativa? Y en nuestro país, las mujeres tenemos una representación del 46% en los cargos de decisión del Estado. Creo firmemente que se deben establecer mecanismos de inclusión que garanticen el ingreso equitativo de las mujeres en la fuerza laboral y alinear esos mecanismos a la lucha para el cierre de brechas entre hombres y mujeres en distintas dimensiones económicas, sociales, culturales, con un énfasis especial en la lucha contra la violencia de las mujeres, con acciones de prevención, con mecanismos de seguridad jurídica y con la transformación cultural. No podemos bajar la guardia. Por eso, en esta oportunidad, quiero invitar a todos los países de la región y en especial a las mujeres líderes latinoamericanas en la conmemoración de nuestro Día Internacional a que sigamos construyendo juntas una región con mayores oportunidades para todas nosotras.
La igualdad de género en la región es uno de los anhelos y los desafíos más grandes de nuestra agenda internacional. Y como Estados debemos garantizar los derechos de las mujeres más allá de nuestras fronteras. Es importante establecer espacios de diálogo regional, pero no solo para dialogar sobre este tema, porque ya bastante se ha hablado, sino para poner directamente manos a la obra. Articular las diferentes acciones, escuchar a los actores, a la sociedad civil, enfocar los esfuerzos de todas y de todos para encontrar diferentes propuestas e iniciativas para el empoderamiento de las mujeres y luchar contra toda forma de violencia hacia ellas. Creo que sí, esto se convertiría en un desafío y una respuesta concreta. Nuestra responsabilidad es trabajar para lograr un mundo para vivir bien, para todas y todos. Esto no es posible sin la participación de los diferentes actores. La CAF es sin duda uno de estos, por lo que aplaudimos el compromiso con la promoción de la equidad de género en la región, porque para hablar del desarrollo efectivo de América Latina debemos hablar también del empoderamiento de la mujer.
El principal reto de las mujeres de América Latina y el Caribe es liberarse de la sobrecarga de labores del cuidado que no son remuneradas. Según ONU Mujeres, las mujeres realizan 2,5 veces más trabajo no remunerado que sus parejas, como cuidar hijos, cocinar o limpiar. Esto, si bien se calcula que representa entre el 10 y el 30% del Producto Interno Bruto, para las mujeres que lo hacen gratuitamente, solo implica mayor vulnerabilidad a ser violentadas e invisibilizadas. Por eso los gobiernos y organizaciones como la CAF deben trabajar en crear un sistema eficaz de servicios del cuidado que esté al alcance del bolsillo de las familias para que se genere empleo formal para las mujeres que tienen esta experticia y vocación y para que otras liberen tiempo para poder dedicarse a desarrollar sus talentos y obtener ingresos. Muy importante trabajar también en vincular en esto a los hombres para que desempeñen con mayor detalle y convicción los roles del cuidado que por lo demás funcionan para lograr relaciones más armoniosas con las personas de su entorno.
Mi nombre es Patricia Hualinga, soy de la Amazonía de Ecuador y me dedico a defender la naturaleza, el territorio, los derechos de los pueblos indígenas y los derechos de las mujeres indígenas. Las mujeres hemos afrontado múltiples inconveniencias, retos, y uno es la violencia intrafamiliar de la que somos víctimas. Y la otra cuestión a la que hemos afrontado es a la invisibilización en las entidades. No importa si son organizaciones indígenas o si son instituciones públicas, las mujeres no son reconocidas, no tienen su propia vocería. Creo que hay que empezar a hermanarnos, a escucharnos entre nosotras para hacer estrategias regionales de cambios profundos. Tal vez nos separan las distancias geográficas, pero no los problemas. Tenemos los mismos problemas a los que tenemos que afrontar. El reto principal de las mujeres en la región es que nos reconozcan como lo que somos: lideresas, voceras, dueñas de su propio destino.
Graças à luta do movimento de mulheres, movimento organizado, a gente conseguiu avançar em vários pontos na agenda de direitos das mulheres.
Gracias por su atención y por acompañarnos en esta mañana del Día Internacional de la Mujer. Daremos inicio al conversatorio Liderazgo de las Mujeres ante los
We will now continue talking about the leadership of women in it will be two different panels.
En las redes sociales,
We
Twitter,
are on social networks, by the way, Twitter, Facebook, at Agenda CAF, and you can also chat, discuss with the hashtag Mujeres Sin Barreras and hashtag CAF. Now we will talk about the challenges to reach the empowerment of women and equal opportunities in Latin America and the Caribbean. It will be moderated by Adriana Reaza. She's the manager of macroeconomic studies in CAF. She's an economist for the UCAF in Caracas, and she has a PhD in the Brown University. She's a teacher in the economy school Andrés Bello. She had worked in the investigations department of Venezuela. She has published investigations papers internationally. We asked them to be with us in this
y la señora Luciana Feinstein, especialistas de género de la
scenario.
De CAF. La señora
Madam Lucila Bernal, a main economist of CAF, and
mi coordinadora e investigadora principal CADEP y La Tinta.
Ms.
Muy buenos días. Vamos a dar inicio al
Good morning. We will
que tenemos en la mañana.
this wonderful panel that we have today with three special guests to mention what each of them does. And Veronica Serafini, from Paraguay. Veronica is an economist. She's a feminist. She's got a doctorate in economy. She's a teacher in the National University of Asunción and a Catholic university. She investigates labor markets, poverty, inequality, social protection policies, and financing for development with a focus on gender. Our specialists here, we've got Edgar Lara, who's a gender specialist of inclusion and diversity in CAF, and an economist by the El Salvador University in Huelva, Spain. He's got experience in analysis of labor markets, labor inequalities, poverty, and indicators with perspective analysis of actions for SMEs. Before he was part of CAF, he was a consultant in different areas on the regional center of the Central America. She speaks too fast, I'm sorry. And El Salvador. Virtually, in the first place, we have from social inclusion, Luciana Feinstein. Luciana is a sociologist. She's got a master's in gender policy at Rio Argentina. She was a coordinator of the Masters of Gender and Equality Policies in Uruguay and as an advisor in the National Institute of Uruguay and the Programs Direction of the Ministry of Social Development. She's got a lot of experience in social policies and institutional policies, design, planning, social and public policies. She has worked in the private sector, in the government, and the civil society, and as a consultant for different organizations. Finally, we've got Lucila Bernal. She's received her PhD and a master's in the Carlos III University of Madrid. Her agenda is focused on understanding human capital in countries that are being developed and in the use of data to inform public policies. Lucina has vast experience in publications of articles as the Julio H. de Oliveira 2016 and 2017, and she's the co-author of the flagship publication of CAF 2022. They'll analyze the mobility between the generations in Latin America. Okay, let's begin this panel. Let's begin with a question for Edgar. We know that in equality, there is progress in terms of rights, but the biggest challenge in Latin America and the Caribbean is still to achieve a more substantive equality. What is the progress made really? And what are the main challenges still ahead? Thank you. Thank you for the space. And Latin America and the Caribbean have had important steps. The challenge is how do those legal frameworks become effective into equality? Obviously, the most important progress in terms of legislation and intra-family violence, into better answers. There have been more steps towards equality, substantial equality, and also diversity. There has been progress in egalitarian marriage and gender identities, but it's how these laws are now translated into concrete policies to guarantee the rights that are established there. So point is how to create the generations of transformations of policies in order to guarantee the access to resources, to guarantee that women especially can have the same rights. That is why we talk about this autonomy in CAF, how to incide in the transformation of inclusion or productive development. That is why we see that there are still gaps. There is still problems in identifying. We have to have more concrete policies, and obviously in violence issues, which is not minor, how we support the countries in the fight of feminicide, gender violence, and diversity. And teenage pregnancy is also key, but something that for us is fundamental and is key has to do with providing a facility for women in decision making. Why? Because we hope that from here, and inciting the changes, it could be easier for promoting what we have just mentioned. So in general terms, what we want to do and what we're betting on is to support policies, defining better policies in such a way that as it is established in the legal frameworks, they can be transformed. Obviously, there is a challenge ahead within the legal frameworks that have to do with provision of digital services. I think that there is an important task that has to do with the legal framework, obviously, and in practice. Thank you, Edgar. I think that you have touched upon some of the key issues that we will discuss here, among which are the autonomy resources that women have to have, the women who go through the labor markets. And in that sense, I would like to give Lucila the microphone with the following question. What is the situation of women in the labor market? She was mentioning this load that is that many times are not counted as working hours, like house chores, etc. So what is that situation like? Lucila. Thank you, Adriana, for the question. And again, the autonomous economical autonomy is very important, and it has to do with own income. And as we saw in the opening video, there are huge gaps in the region in this sense because 27% of women do not have their own money, and that is only 8% for men, that number. That is worse if we talk about public transfers, because that would lead us to a 37% of women that do not have their own income. That means that 4 out of 10 women do not have this source of financial freedom. So this, obviously, there's the poverty indexes are higher for women than for men. And what is behind this? What is behind all this? As you were saying, and there's the labor markets. The labor markets of all the world, there's huge gaps, gender gaps. And these gender gaps have been becoming smaller in the region and in the world. But in the last 10 years, especially in Latin America, this close of the gap has been decelerating, and it's concerning. And because of the COVID-19 crisis, this trend of closing the gaps in 2020 has been different. Now there are bigger gaps in the region than 2 years ago. So I'd like to give numbers to all this because then we will be able to understand it and to understand why and what is behind the gaps and the problem of the economic autonomy. And a key indicator is the labor participation. It's a decision to participate in the labor markets. And there we find huge gaps in the that go from 30% in position in Latin America, among the most unequal of nations. Behind regions that usually we consider with high inequalities, such as the Middle East and others. So the region is not well positioned in this sense still, and even though there has been progress in the last decades. We also have to acknowledge that the region is quite diverse, and there are countries with small gender gaps, and this happens a lot in the Southern Cone, and other countries with bigger gaps, and this happens more in Central America. But in all of these countries, South America, Central America, there's a huge common factor that explains these differences in the labor market. And that factor has to do with children staying at home. And in our investigations, this was consistent. In Latin America, when children come into a home, there's always a bigger gap. When we compare men to women, obviously the gaps do not stop in the participation of work, but go beyond. The women that do work dedicate on average less time, less hours than men to this type of task. And for every hour that they've worked, they receive 5% less of salary. So their salaries are always lower. Also, women do carry out tasks that are different than those that men do. For example, women are overrepresented in informality and self-employment. And there's more women than men, obviously, in sectors that have lower wages and that have less technology involved. This is concerning for several motives, but going back to the causes behind this, we could group them in two large groups of factors. All of the causes behind this that I just mentioned, and on the other hand, the causes associated to disproportionate labor and chores, and home labor and chores. With regards to the occupational segregation, the reasons are quite varied. On the one hand, there are factors that are highly related to abilities and skills. So there is some difference in human capital of men and women. And let me give you an example. Today in the region, the women have more formal education than men. We are more present. We have a higher percentage of university degrees, but we are underrepresented in science and technologies, engineering, maths, that we know that are the fields that enable us to better paid jobs and are better prepared to face technology change and automatization. So those occupations will be better off facing technology challenges. We're underrepresented in other types of occupations, such as the hierarchy ones. And all this segregation is connected with the unproportionate tasks that we already mentioned before. It's reinforced with other factors, such as the discrimination in work and the absence of role models that show everything that women are able to give to the organizations and the economy in general. And on the other group, those that are related to sexual harassment at work, and recently I mentioned that women work less hours. They work more hours in tasks that are not paid for. They work more hours a week than men. And this overload of domestic work was huge. And it's still during the COVID-19 crisis. And today we know that many women left the labor market because they had to stay home and take care of the kids, especially during lockdowns. And today, sadly, the women have not gone back to work. And we feel that in the short term, they will not be able to go back to work. So this is very sad because they had progressed a lot during the last years. Yes, this gap had been shortened in the last years. Women have positions that are not so well paid, and that the work they do, the work they do at home reduces the amount of hours that they can dedicate to a formal market. Without a doubt, this has a cost for the women and for the economies. In that sense, I would like to ask you, how can we weigh this economically in the region? Because you've studied this. Yes. Beyond seeing these statistics, what we try to do in a network of generational economy, I don't know if you can see the gap on the PowerPoint. What we did was work and measure this macroeconomically. Put this into numbers, see what the impact was of this inequalities in macroeconomic terms and throughout the life of women. And what we found was that this gap that is wide, and the income of women, especially, we don't want young girls to work, of course, but the income that they made from 18 years and up are always below that of men of the others. So this gap has to do with a lot of reasons. In the first place, that in Latin America, almost half of the women are outside the labor market. And being outside the labor market is what is called minis. And that's where we have to be careful with the issue. An effort that we have to do is look at the statistics and the categories differently. Because in Latin America is 80% women. Women that don't work and don't study. Or do work but are not getting a salary. In Paraguay, we see that they work 37 hours a week. That means that they work almost full time, but then that is not considered real work. That's a first element. The other thing that we have to consider is a labor category that exists in our country that is non-paid family work. A lot of women are within the they make zero money, but they help the family business. They work hard within the family business, but they make no money. Then there's the labor discrimination. That is the indicator that we all know. That is the 20-25%. When we measure this, we see that women are not being paid. But in Latin America, they are giving between 15 and 25% of the GDP. I mean, if we measure it in Paraguay, this means everything that is produced by agriculture and others. But that it is important to add this to this because if we think of social inclusion of women, we would have to think, as our colleague said, Latin American and Paraguayan women are working more hours than men. If we add the hours that are paid and unpaid. So how can we continue including women laborally? How to reduce this amount of women that are not making their own money if they already are working more than men when we add the paid and unpaid hours? That is a fundamental piece that we have to take care of when we think of public policies. Because if in Latin America there has been a reduction of the gaps, there's two elements. The growth rates of the commodities, 5-6%, that will not exist anymore. And in the second place, we need to reduce other gaps, such as the access to Social Security, because today women did go into the labor market, but those women who did go into the labor market in the boom of the commodities will not have a pension fund, and they will fall into poverty after 60 years, or they are more likely to fall into poverty. The third element is that today we have to consider that the estimates that we're doing indicate that the period of the pandemics has made us fall back at least a decade. 2 years of pandemic have made us lose a decade in the achievements of women. And let's remember this: it's not a product of the pandemics. The pandemics deepened what had already been happening since 2014. Don't think it's the pandemic. This had already been happening since 2013, 2014, when the commodities boom started falling. These great achievements of the last 10, 15 years. And then we add the other risk that we didn't have in the boom of the commodities, is that evidence shows us that in the 80s, those that suffered the most, the biggest impact to pay the debts, were women. So we have not considered that factor yet in the analysis and then the projections of the future in the region or in Latin America. So we have to ask ourselves in this context, who will pay the debt? And that's where we add another debate that we have to have from within the women, which is the taxes, the unfair taxes in Latin America. Too many indirect taxes, and women are very committed because they are the ones that do the administration of and it's and any time there's an increase of indirect taxes, there's a reduction of the resources and beyond the fact of the inflation that we are feeling because of the huge responsibilities women have in these inflation processes. They are always responsible for balancing the income and micromanaging, which I'm sure that in the past, in the 80s as well, this was balanced out with an overload in the work of women because they replaced activities that they had to do things, more work at home. So there is a huge debate pending, and especially the challenge of seeing this as a whole, seeing what is happening in Latin America and in Paraguay today with regards to how we go out or recover from the pandemic. Thank you, Veronica. When you talk and when you say that unpaid work of women can be about 15 to 20% of the GDP, and that is the size of the farming sector of Paraguay and many of the productive centers of Latin America, it's really mind-boggling, the size and the impact and what this number means with regards of income for women and vulnerability, because what women have done has been concentrated in informal sectors without social protection, as was mentioned as well. And now we will go with Luciana to talk about something that has to do with one of the most vulnerable aspects of women, that is gender violence. Without a doubt, it is one of the most grave issues of gender inequality in the world and, of course, in the region. So, Luciana, I'd like to ask you, what can you say about gender violence in the region and what impact this has in the life of women? Thank you very much, Adriana. Well, they are very broad and interesting questions, especially when we talk about gender issues. We're talking about loss of physical autonomy, that of course it interacts with the other autonomies, but it is key, to start the road to equality. With regards to the prevalence of violence based on we wanted to mention some numbers. We've got the worst numbers of feminicide and domestic violence and sexual violence. We talk less of some other forms of violence and expression of violence, like more women have psychological or economical violence. They have intimidation, humiliation, isolation, not giving them money or taking their money away, using money as a tool or as a weapon in many of the homes. With regards to what we can say or what is behind violence based on gender, I wouldn't have enough time to answer this. It is a multi-factor phenomenon. Now, as a multi-factor phenomenon, sorry, I thought I could share the screen, but no. There is a model that I won't be able to present, associated to violence by partners, is systemic, and it integrates the social context and the different levels of interactions. In that model, we try to show that there's not one sole factor that can explain why some people or groups of people are more exposed to the risk of suffering violence based on gender, or why other people are better protected. And then violence as a result of different levels, community, society, the individual, and all of those levels, can't show this here, but in all of those levels, there's a lot of weight on the social conditioning. By this, I mean how the society has been, or how the society sees masculinity as aggression, competition, dominance, strength, where women, where it's okay to use violence for correction, where the romantic part is in these different levels. Sorry, she was cutting off. There's a reference to survival, the situation's violence. So in this model, the existence, the affirmation, the naturalization, and internalization chauvinistic values and a way of understanding aggression, the scarce contact with other types of emotions operates in all of the model. So this responds to the question of the the statistics are not just aggregates of individual situations of not even only feminicide. I mean, they are different. I mean, it's practices of domination, social domination, because on the one hand, it's domination done by men over women, and because they are socially tolerated and even promoted. Sometimes this may not seem true, but there are some studies that show very clearly this affirmation. There was a recent study of Colombia of the social acceptance of violence. It shows how far society promotes and accepts these types of violence. It's important also to point out that in the last decades, there has been a lot of information on one of the types of violence, which is domestic violence, but there's very few statistics on violence based on gender and or other actors that are not on LGBT people. And we start to see a lot of qualitative evidence when the states build other types of violence based on gender. This starts to be overwhelming because this is part of the public agenda in the civil society and between. We know that in our continent, there's a lot of women's trafficking and human trafficking and violence against women at all types that you can imagine. As we already said, during the pandemics, there was a lot of setback, and some has become more acute. We don't have enough statistics to affirm some of them. Understanding the mechanics behind this allows us to know that the confinement has increased the frequency of sexual abuse and violence and the loss of rights. There have been more unwanted pregnancies and STDs as a product of violence in the family, and a context of restrictions of access because people were not able to go to doctors and they were not able to get contraceptives. Also, between immigration and the use of TICs has increased. So now we have to answer what implications this has for women. There's a consequence on the inequality of gender, the different types of violence by different players in different areas affect basically the use of rights of women and children.
Además de producir, en algunos casos, lesiones físicas que generan, por ejemplo, ausentismos y costos para los sistemas laborales y para los sistemas de salud, son las secuelas
for the labor. There's a lot of psychological problems where women start losing the economy and decision making. One of the first effects of violence based on gender is isolation. Women feel pressure to cut off family ties. This has a direct effect on their capacities of social and personal development and labor development. So without the support of their people, with their self-esteem destroyed, their psychopathological issues such as depression or PSTD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So in many cases, they also, besides losing their jobs, if they haven't quit before, they lose it. And without having access to their own home, their own resources, we know that these women cannot just decide to move and enter, and so therefore they have to stay as almost prisoners. Many times the victim minimizes the situation, the violence situations that they have at home. If the state does not support them, it's practically impossible. So I congratulate all of us here today because we are moving forward in this sense. And in the last decades, there has been a lot of efforts and bigger efforts to fight violence based on gender, but there's still a big road ahead.
Muchas gracias, Luciana. De acá, pues, tenemos una situación bastante complicada. Yo creo que
Luciana.
Los temas de violencia de género impactan no solamente directamente la violencia en sí, sino que impactan a la mujer y a su capacidad de tener autonomía.
The economic autonomy as well. There's severe psychological issues as well. What is behind all of this? In part is a social conditioning because people accept this type of actions. We only have a few minutes left so we can be on time. We have to think on what is ahead of it. What can we do with regard to public policies to repair this situation? And I wanted to go back to Lucila. What measures or what policies do you think are important so that we can really insert women into the labor markets? What I would like to do here to answer your question, Elena, is to connect it to the two types of causes that we mentioned before. On the one hand, we had all of the causes that have to do with this disproportionate overload of domestic labors that fall on women. And to this respect, well, there's a wide array of things, but I would like to emphasize on four of them. One has to do with the expansion of educational services, especially early ages. And here, the main challenge that also sees not only for small children, there's also the challenge of providing these services with quality enough so that there can be a consistency in the importance of that stage of development of children. Those are very sensitive periods where we develop different dimensions for the human capital of children. So any system of care must be thought not only to contribute the social insertion of women and other members of the home, but also seeking to look after and be very respectful of that critical stage of the development of children. And one policy is one thing is the expansion of the of the school day. And there the key challenge is in expanding these systems that must be set up on basic education that is already well grounded. So there is a big challenge and we have to adapt this and the financing of the expansion of longer school days. Okay? These are expensive policies. On the other hand, we have policies that were discussed and were being discussed in other countries that have to do with expanding parent licenses for or the time that parents can stay at home with their kids, so that it doesn't provide unnecessary undesirable collateral damage. They should activate the co-responsibility in parenting, co-parenting, and also when there's a huge labor informality that a lot of our countries have. Co-parenting goes, or there's a lot of informality that is a key factor to take into account in this type of policy. And finally, one could think that in policies that generate a more fluid dialogue for the public and private sector, so that there can be a change in the organization, and so that we can better have a mix of family and work time. And we're thinking of more flexibility of schedules for everyone that has some kind of, not just women, but everyone that has to take care of someone else at home. So it has to do with harmony, work-life balance, all these other causes that have to do with occupational segregation that we mentioned before. And here I just want to mention 3 or 4 policies. One is crucial, that is supporting the educational systems in all the levels, including also technical professionals, so that there can be reforms that encourage women. Also, the programs of training women in leadership roles for women in corporations and the public sector, aiming at improving the representation of women in decision-making roles. There's a huge number of affirmative action policies that can also be implemented, on which we don't have full evidence. Their design is not trivial, and we have to learn a lot from it to generate more knowledge on what type of policies are the result of affirmative action. And as we mentioned before, the collab with the private sector, well, we have to try to have safe workplaces for women, and not only women, but LGBT as well. And finally, we have a policy that is all-encompassing, and it's like the elephant in the room in the region that talks about segregation. The spectrum is quite wide: social, human capital formation, and I would like to leave this behind, just this food for thought, and so that later we can discuss policies that we could promote from CAF in each of these 2 big gender gaps. Thank you, Lucila. Verónica, has there been progress in any of these policies in Paraguay? We are behind in Paraguay. We need to move forward in I'm sorry, losing her.
De amplio alcance, todas estas, pero yo le agregaría también la cuestión del envejecimiento. Estamos envejeciendo mucho más.
Okay, we are aging faster than what Europe aged. Employment is only 10% in the care area, 95% are women, and it is one of the sectors that has the most informality and more productivity. So there is huge efforts there of working together to formalize and make the work more professional. And caretaking. Another big challenge Paraguay has is the growth model. The growth model today, before the pandemic, our income was the same as 3 years ago. That makes us, so if we want to encourage more inclusion in women, we have to see what sectors to encourage, not just any sector. What are the sectors that are potentially important to incorporate women in situations of equality, with less discrimination, more formality? Because the inclusion that we saw in the past years did not allow us to decrease the gap. So we have to look at economic policies with strategy. We have to see what areas to work harder on. And the other thing we have to work on is infrastructure. We are moving forward towards infrastructure, but our concept is terrible. We need to build more roads and bridges. But what about the infrastructure of care? That has a huge impact on the productivity and the economic growth and sustainability and social security that are grave issues in the sustainability of the debt, and above all, and mainly, the economy, the autonomy of the economy of women. We have a huge challenge in thinking of micro policies, micro level policies, but debating what policies at a macro level support the other policies, because the micro policies without an analysis of the macro could perhaps not have such a big impact as expected if we look at the macro aspects as well. So we've got a lot to work on as a country to see where we move, where we go from here, and in parallel discuss the policies that women need to make the best of this growth, of this economic growth, and well, to get into the agenda of what we want to, that is women that are more financially independent and life quality of life. Of course, Veronica, I agree with you. We have to work with these public policies, as you mentioned, so that they can be effective. Luciana, let's continue working with policies against gender violence. What has been the progress in the region, and what are the gaps that you identify, the biggest gaps, and what should be done to close these gaps? It's very hard to talk about the region in terms, on average, especially, not so much the gaps and the incidents of the problems of public policies, but also with regards to the progress in public policies. There's a huge disparity in Latin America and the Caribbean. If we could go in, okay, so there's violence based on gender, which would be well-being, the empowerment of the communities to prevent and mitigate risks based on gender, and strengthening institutional capacities of the state to prevent and repair. We could say that in the second line, there is not a lot done yet on the capacities. This has to do with the different factors. One of the ones that I understand could be the gravest is the difficulties that the states still have in dialoguing and articulate and talking to the civil society. There are some concrete examples that we can look back at. And the third one, in the strengthening of the institutions of the states, I dare say that there's a lot to be done, because in that category, there has been a lot of progress in legislation and norms in our continent in the last 2 decades, in different moments and different levels of discussion of legislation. And if we go to the Gender Observatory of Latin America and the Caribbean, we can see if based on gender, there's about 380 norms among the 38 countries of Latin America and the Caribbean that Spain and Portugal are part of, on, well, violence of the first generation, second generation, and laws that mention femicide as and other, Peru, Bolivia, that cover public violence. In this item, we can also see everything that has to do with the state, such as the policing for women, which is a great example of the disparity of the advance. We've got countries that are questioning the need of having these specific, I mean, it's like Uruguay saying we don't really need these instances, but in other countries we are just discussing these spaces. As is the case of Chile, where they have shown, or some studies have shown, that when women make formal complaints, they are harassed And it's even worse. It's almost counterproductive. In this sense, the police formation is also another key element that has to do with strengthening the institutional capacities of the state. And again, there's a huge disparity in the countries of the continent. I would dare say that Argentina in 2006 started a process that worked a lot, not only to improve the policing work, but also better training and how to feel and think, with keeping in mind human rights. About assistance, there's a huge deploy of primary action and the coordination with the sectors, with the police, with the prosecutors. There are shelters. The only country that has legislation about this is Dominican Republic. It is the only one that has said that this has to exist, and the rest there are setbacks and there's progress. We have moved forward a lot in referencing or finding them. There are ankle bracelets that have gotten to Costa Rica, Argentina, Ecuador, Mexico, Uruguay. And we have also moved forward in programs or services for men that want to stop being violent. They are assisted, or sometimes the judges force them to receive psychological assistance. In Peru, Mexico, I know that they have some of these programs, maybe in other countries as well. But there's a big discussion because, well, the index, we don't know if the investment is worth it because men do it again or do the actions again. So we have to see other types of support. There's still a lot of work ahead, especially in how do we get to the women and how do we get to the LGBT populations to say, okay, what is the real access to justice? And for that, what we need, besides moving forward, and the deployment is widening them so that we can cover all other territories, because in many countries what happens is that they are available, but if you get away from these centers, these institutions, we lose public policies. They don't get to the end users. But if I would have to choose the urgencies or any roads, what we would have to do, thinking of the 16 measures, or the 16 years of activism based on November, I would choose two roads. I would use two roads, one to operate materially and one symbolically. We have to promote self-employment, and we have to support women being financially independent so they can escape violence. We have to promote protected work, preferential access to housing. All this is important so that the violence link can never be abandoned. I mean, not having where to go live, find a house, not being able to give your children basic well-being. That is why many women do not leave their homes, and once they go back to the with their partner. So economic independence is key for that physical independence. Then there's the huge the symbolic tool that is a cultural change that has to come from two main players. On the one hand, the media, that and on the other hand, involving, it's time to make a big call to action to encourage solidarity between the people and to commit all of those values that to not be violent, to not be shamanistic, that disdain all the different types of violence, and for them to do so actively, not only the big violence as we have seen in Argentina and Uruguay, like mass rape, group raping to condemn the subtle violence and that build upon, because we cannot build it from the agenda of women. They can build an active agenda and that cannot actually be, or gang rape, that's the word, gang rape. So in that is the only one that will allow us to overcome the violence against women in all the dimensions. Thank you.
Perfecto. Muchísimas gracias, Luciana. Edgar.
Thank you, Luciana. Edgar, the problem is that we have no more time left. And so please be very brief. Tell us about the CAF strategy just to close and end. Yeah, that has been, that's what we have done. We have supported our countries with regards to implementing, redefining, and financing the policies of equality. So the CAF role there is that through the financing and transfer of knowledge and technical assistance, we can be part of the change. And how do we do this? In the case of Ecuador, we have supported the Corporation of Solidarity with a credit line or to support those economic initiatives led by women or companies that have some criteria. With Costa Rica also, we have provided technical assistance to support the government in the implementation to eliminate the gender gaps in the financial sector. And also in Venezuela, there's another initiative of detecting and preventing. So our work there is how can we impact better public policies for gender equality. Another example was also a year ago, we defined a roadmap in policies. And there we understood that one of the key elements that Luciana was already showing us is that investing in economic freedom is a key element to get women out of that cycle. Therefore, the actions connected to developing capacities for us is also key to this issue. So in general terms, that is the purpose, to be partners of the governments, defining public policies, provide technical assistance, and generate knowledge for a better management. Thank you. Thank you. Edgar, Veronica, Lucila. I think we have had a tough but a very rich panel. And clearly there are opportunities and room for improvement here so that we can close those gender gaps. To all of you, thank you. And we move on to the next panel.
Agradecemos a Adriana, Edgar, Luciana, Lucila y
I want to
Verónica.
thank Adriana, Edgar, Lucila, and Veronica for this wonderful panel that took place this morning. It was the first one. Now we're going to the next. Women in leadership roles, persisting challenges, and new opportunities, moderated by Ms. Barbara Uriquio. She's a specialist on gender, inclusion, and CAF. She's worked for over a decade as an analyst of the program in the gender and the Regional Center of Latin America and the Caribbean, the UN program. She's got a bachelor's degree with the Luigi Bocconi, Italy, of the University of Milan, Italy. And she works on the decentralization of the Universidad Vasco, Spain. We're also with Miss Neila Yadira Amudi. She's from Tikitiki, Colombia. Miss Arabella Carreras, governor of the province of Rio Negro, Argentina. And Miss Lorena Soto, director of education. She's an entrepreneur of the Fundación Paraguay. You can go to your places while I introduce you to the other panelists that will be connected virtually. Gloria Roeli Reyes Gomez, director of the program of Dominican Republic. Madam Malena Galvarini, president of Water and Saneamiento, Argentina. And Claudio Palacios from El Tiempo, Colombia.
¿Se escucha? Bueno, muy buenos días nuevamente a todas y todos los que nos acompañan.
Good morning, everyone that is with us here, as well as those of you that are on the other side of a screen. Today, I have the privilege and honor of opening the second space of dialogue with our 6 panelists, or 6 women that are with us here, and others that are connected virtually. We will have the opportunity to reflect on the different challenges that we were hearing about in the previous panels that women are still facing in the exercise of their leaderships and their participation in decision-making spaces in the different policy spheres, social, economic, and communities. We will also have the opportunity of learning how, from their leadership, each from their roles, have managed to move forward towards a change of culture and policies in favor of equality, gender equality, diversity, and social inclusion that has to do with the Agenda 2030. So allow me to introduce the panelists that are here with us today. I will start with welcoming Director Reyes, who is with us virtually. Gloria is the General Director of the Superate program of the Presidency of Dominican Republic. She's in the Madre Maestra Law School. She did a postgrads in political sciences in the Catholic University of Santo Domingo. And she has a master's in international law of the Madrid University in microfinance of the Alcalá Foundation. In August of 2016, she became the youngest legislator of National Congress when she was elected member of the House of the province of Santo Domingo by the Modern Revolutionary Party. We welcome her. Neila Yadira, welcome. She's the mayor of Tikitiki, Colombia. She was elected in October 2021 by popular vote as the first female leader and the youngest of all of the mayors. She was one of the best leaders in her period, and the first Afro woman of the East Coast to be part of the departmental cabinet. We welcome her. Arabella Carteras, welcome, is the governor of Rio Negro, Argentina. She was director of economic development in the municipal, and she was president-elect of the commission that drafted the San Carlos de Bariloche letter. She was legislator of Rio Negro. She directed the Ministry of Tourism and Sports. Arabella, welcome. She's the first female president of the water company of Argentina.
y ex secretaria de Política Sanitaria y Desarrollo Humano del municipio de Tigre en Argentina.
She's from Tigre in Argentina. Malena, welcome. Claudia Palacios is also with us virtually. Is a social communicator. She's a journalist, and she has written several books. The most recently, Embruja, or in English would be like Bewitched, Gender Equality. She's got a master's from the Colombian University of Los Andes. Claudia has been working for 25 years, working on TV, radio, and press as the director, producer, reporter, presenter, and creator of content focused on social impact. Welcome, Claudia. Finally, Lorena Soto, who's with us here today. In this panel, Lorena is a manager of the financial education and executive director of Junior Achievement. Lorena has a master's in business with an emphasis on finances, and together with her sister, she was one of the first Paraguayans in obtaining, through soccer or football, full scholarships to study in the United States. In the sports arena, Lorena represented Paraguay as part of the national team in football, and she's been playing international football semi-professionally in Indiana, United States, and later in Europe professionally. In Paraguay, in 2014, she founded the organization PC Beca, which provides opportunities of scholarships, of football scholarships in universities of the United States and in community and social work in the Fundación Paraguaya. Foundation. Lorena, welcome. As you may see, we have a panel of 6 women that are leaders. And so before we begin, I want to mention briefly that the panel will take place in 2 parts. Each panel will have 5 minutes. Panelists will have 5 minutes. I kindly request you, so that we can all have you, that please use your moment, your time. Don't go over time. So I will start. I will start with the first, and I will enable this first.
Muy bienvenida, directora. Con la siguiente pregunta. En la región nos enfrentamos a una feminización de la pobreza.
In the region, there's poverty. For every 100 women, there's 113 women in similar situation. Currently, Superate, the biggest program of the Dominican Republic program, has a key role in the fight against poverty. What strategic vision do you consider should be incorporated from your leadership to cover this gender gap and to guarantee egalitarian development? Thank you very much. Good morning. A warm greeting from the Caribbean. Thank you for the space. I'm happy to see that we are always talking about these reflections and looking for solutions to end the gaps. I would like to start, in order to answer this question, by saying that the Dominican government has a high priority to guarantee the overcoming female poverty. And with this, we have committed to changing this trend, placing women in the center of the policies to fight poverty, especially widening their opportunities for labor inclusion. And as we have already heard during the day, those needs that are to better distribute the workload from co-responsibility area. The reasons for this phenomenon, the higher level of poverty in our country, are different and they vary, starting with the barriers for formal employment and the equal conditions that are obviously part of the deficit of services of caretaking that are, for us, are the critical nodes of inequality in gender in our country, in DAMREP, as well as in the rest of the region. The barriers that are already set are added to the current context of the remnants of a pandemic that made the recovery of employment be less equal. Sadly, manual labor for the sectors such as construction and the agro industry left behind that employment in which women had a higher participation. So while the crisis was there, more women than men lost their jobs. And in the process of recovering, more men were employed than women. And also, we can add this to the different aspects of the structures of decades of inequality. And there I go to your question, that we have moved forward, even though it's a new government, even though we started in such a complex context as a pandemic after economic crisis. And in the current situation, we have had some victories, but there still are many bridges to build and many walls to build. So for this, we transformed the vision of social protection and DOMREP under the leadership of our president, encouraging a new outlook, an outlook that would see the autonomy of the homes. We are leaving behind this vision of administrating poverty to a vision that wants people, we have to end inequality or bridge the gaps or have affirmative actions that can have more access to the families and women. In that sense, each of the lines, the program lines that have been developed from Superate have a transversal axis with a focus on gender. We created a gender plan that permeates all of the actions of this program in the territory so that we can have an idea of the scope of the program. Currently, the program has the protection of 1,150,000 families during the conditioned subsidies and support. This represents about 50% of the population of DOMREP. In this year, we have increased 2% in the investment of the IDB. This is 150,000 million pesos. That's a big investment that obviously is reflected in women that are in 60% represented in each of these programs that we are carrying out. But this initiative that we have given a priority to have been actions that seek the support, active support to the women who are the heads of households. We're talking also about spaces for continuous training. We have had agreements with the private sector and international bodies to generate capacities and production to support these women who are part of the programs, as in the super entrepreneurial women, that about 10,000 women will work this year. In the 30 seconds that I have left, I do want to highlight that we are carrying out important efforts with the pilot program, the caring communities, in two directions. We want to widen the current network, and at the same time, we want to create a network of family caretakers. They will be selected from the Superate program to provide services. They will be hired by the state to provide services to other families that are in need. So what we have now is creating skills, social protection, and more opportunities for financial autonomy or financial freedom. Thank you so much, Director. Right on time. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so thank you. Now we will go to Mo, the mayor. Welcome again. You are the first mayor, and you're part of the 12% of women who were elected as mayor in the period 2020-2023 in Colombia. This clearly shows that for many women, the participation in the processes is still a long and hard road. What would you say to other young women like you who want to have a space in politics, but still are being very resisted in armed conflict, in spaces like yours, like in Colombia, where there is still a lot of armed conflict? Well, I would like to start by thanking CAF for their invitation. For me, it was very important to be able to be here. Recommendations. Oh, there's a long list. As you were saying, facing politicians to the patriarchal or chauvinistic structures, it's not easy. But for me, there's a summary of 3 or 4 pillars. The first thing is that I feel that in my case, because of the education that I had at home, for me, it was very clear that I had to seek an education, that education could change the life of many people. I was born in a very rural area, in the coast. And in Colombia, these territories have a huge gap in all the sectors with regards to the center of the country. So it was very clear, like, okay, what do you want? You have to have very clear what you want. Another thing that is a determinant factor is to create groups of interest. In my case, I'm using myself as an example again, what I did was create, together with other people, with other young women, with men, groups of youth groups, groups of women. And so we went from complaining that nothing was ever done to, okay, what can we do? What can we do? So going from that activism to concrete action. So in this group of women or young people, to be able to do recycling campaigns, identifying what children are staying behind in schools. How can we level this or bridge this gap? Just concrete actions. In the framework of this, and how in one way or another, this could position or could give certain visibility. So I think it was determining not only in that community process, the youth process, but also in the decision to participate, the decision making or the policy, just emotional strength. You have to know that a lot of people will go against what you stand for. And you have to be strong emotionally to understand this and to continue moving forward. In my specific case, I remember that during my campaign, a lot of men were saying, go home, go to the kitchen, do some cooking, your rice will dry. You should have had children. Everything that is part of our culture. And that is a stigma that comes with being a woman, but having that emotional strength of knowing that that type of thing will come, but you just have to be focused on what you are here to do. So it's important to have that very clear, to have the groups of interest, to create references, and to have a lot of strength.
Pasamos ahora exactamente hace un año.
Exactly 1 year ago, March 8th, 2021, you, together with your peers of the whole provinces in Buenos Aires, you all committed with the important initiative, Argentina United Against Violence, encouraged by the nation. This initiative that seeks to strengthen the work and violence against women is a clear example of how, from this leadership, we can accelerate and eliminate gaps, gender gaps. From your position as governor, what type of leadership should be promoted so that we can make this a priority, and what are the challenges ahead? Well, thank you for this introduction. I am the first female governor in Rio Negro, in the history of Rio Negro. So it's interesting to start taking on the leadership roles. In the first place, I want to point out that to be a woman does not mean that you always have to have gender issues. I mean, if you are a woman, you naturally, just have to give a priority to the gender issues and the transformation. And to achieve this, we have to challenge ourselves first, and our training and the constitution and just the way the society is made up. It's not easy to sit in a chair where decisions have been made in one way and with a certain perspective during the whole history of the province, of years, hundreds of years, thousands of years of the history of humanity, and take on a different agenda, because the day-to-day is currently imposing decision-making that is new for us. And sometimes the way ahead to give answers to that is to repeat the models in the decision-making of the past. So I think that there we have a first task at hand, that is to rethink the way in which we exercise power, rethink it from a female perspective, not repeat or not masculinize decision making is something that is very difficult. Not be we have to go against what men are watching us, and they are expecting certain things. They are expecting certain actions, and they feel that they are being generous, and they constantly judge us. They constantly judge our policies, and they give their opinion, generally negatively, or at least in the beginning, towards our work or the work that we do and how we are carrying on our decisions. Why is it negative? Just because it's different. Societies tend to be conservative and not transformative, and we have a huge challenge ahead that also implies taking on new roles. It's not difficult to know what the agenda is. We heard the panelists, and that were informing us of the gaps and the main issues. And we talked about the theory and the hierarchy. So the agenda is already there. The issue is taking the decisions that require a lot of strength. Many things too. First of all, the leadership has to be more agreed upon, less confrontational, less violent. This is one of the first things that I think that women have to change, so we can change the story of humanity. And also, going bit by bit, I'll share some experience. We in the government of the province of Rio Negro, which is a government that tends to gender equality, we decided to deliver property deeds to women of all of the properties that the government of all the RITs. So we thought, okay, we'll use positive policies. So property, right now, in the history of humanity, property has been in the hand of men. So now we have a strong policy to provide land to women. And in the title deeds, it was a priority to give title deeds to women. A family has, part of the financial strength and financial stability of a family is to have a home. So when it's part of the family, but it's in the name of a woman, it goes against the society and tradition. Property is a fundamental base. And like this, many other policies that were deemed necessary, like the transversalization of the gender. And in all of the ministries, we have to work together to evaluate and plan the development of the different areas. It's also necessary to move forward. In the police, we have training in human rights and gender policies since the beginning of the police training, and we have managed to have the lowest index of crime of the last 10 years in the province of Rio Negro, with active policies and with the same players, the same hierarchies, the same everything we had, but with a different perspective. Thank you. Thank you, Governor. Now we go to virtually with Malena Carmarini. Welcome. You have also become the first woman. Can we? Yes, I can hear you. Thank you. You became the first woman to lead an important company such as the water company in Argentina. Since December 2019, you took on the leadership in a challenging sector. And also, from the gender perspective, it's very chauvinistic with the participation of men. In this context, what would you recommend to other women that want to take high roles where there's a vertical structure and there's a hostile environment and it's discriminatory against women? Okay, I'll take 1 second to thank CAF and to thank everyone in this session and the past session. I'm very proud to be part of this, together with all of these women who are all very empowered and are doing great things. It's very tough to get to the places. In my case, it was not easy. It was not easy to become the president of this company. As you say, it's very chauvinistic. The whole water industry, in the beginning, maybe with all the difficulties that we all had, everybody would question why us? Where are we coming from? What did we study? They were questioning everything. Are we capable? And something I will take on something that we took as natural recently. Somebody was talking about the emotional strength that we have to have as women to reinforce our leadership roles, and we naturalized that. And it is hard, and they don't ask men for that. Men are not. They're not. I mean, they ask so much from us. Besides the job that we have to do the other type of work that is not visible. So I think, Barbara and friends, that it is important to meet, to share our experiences, and also to understand that it's not enough with the theory. It's not enough with the studies and analysis. Arabella, who's from Argentina like me, was saying, well, we have to take these issues to action. And that's what I believe in. If we make it to the leadership roles, the best example that we can give to other women so that they can fight to make it to leadership roles is to not betray them, to not leave them behind. All of us that made it here have the obligation. We owe it to those that are still out there, that are still fighting. We owe it to them to make all of these studies and theories and into concrete actions. That is why I want to respect the 5 minutes. I could spend a lot of time, but with all the actions that we have from Switzerland, but I think it's more important now to know about this. Everybody that made it here, we're just a number. We're just the ones that made it. And there's still many of us out there fighting. And if we don't take on the responsibility, if we don't hold out our hand to them, or if we don't help them overcome the patriarchy, we will be betraying ourselves. It's not enough to just make it. It's not enough to be 100. We have to be millions. If we women understand that it's half plus one, if we unite, if we start taking action, if we understand that we're not a minority, but we are a majority, well, then men will probably finally understand that we are part of decision making. Thank you, Malena. Thank you for your intervention. No, Lorena Soto. As you may know, a couple of weeks ago, we reached a historical agreement between the Soccer Federation of the United States and that guaranteed the equal pay in female and male football in all the competitions. This is a great milestone in the fight in the equal rights for women. There are still gaps with regards to the leadership of women. From your experience, what are the main challenges still in the region, and what are the new opportunities for for a bigger role? Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for giving this topic such relevance. And thank you for having me, a former football player, in this panel. Going to the questions, talking about the barriers. There's many barriers to overcome. So I want to focus on 3 main barriers. Experience. The experience that I had, I think, is fundamental to shorten these gaps. I want to focus on the culture in South America. And with regards to football, in general, I also want to talk about the lack of investment and the issues for female sports women or sports people, persons. And about the US, I lived there for 6 years and I learned a lot, especially the huge differences we have and why we have those big differences. The United States was world champion 4 times and 4 times gold medalists in the Olympics, and it's not a coincidence. And it's not something that happened by chance. What we see in the United States and what we see here with the salary equal pay is because this culture is part of the family, and it's towards women, and the investment is there. Now there's investment from female football as federations in the United States in society. There are other sectors that invest in female football, and that investment adds up to a wholesome investment. And the structure, I would like to explain how a girl in the United States goes from playing soccer for fun to playing soccer professionally. That does not happen in our region, sadly. We're still behind, very behind, but at least we're on the right track. Talking about the culture, in the United States, a parent is proud of his child or girl being an athlete. If his girl or her girl plays soccer, it's beautiful. They understand that sports is not just sports per se, but it builds character and it makes a person successful. So sports is a stage that potentially, with that experience, they could be successful, or that success could pour down to their life. So parents in the US want their children to be into sports. It gives them a sense of pride and status. That does not happen in Paraguay. It does not happen in South America or Latin America. It's the opposite. Female football is seen as is not very well approved. It's not pretty, as they say, and it's got a lot of stigmas and stereotypes. With regards to investment, and that's where I would like to use financial education that I heard about during my whole sports life, and after having worked in female soccer is, there's still not a lot of investment. It's still an expense and it's not profitable. And there's a huge difference between expense and investment. Expense is to have specific funds for female football, and then not doing any follow-up, or just not planning, just simply making the funds available and hoping for it to be used. That's why female football is still generates expenses. Now, if we want to invest in female football, we have to have the same funds, the same income, but with a purpose, with planning, with market study, with analysis of what female football is for all the players, for all the parties, not just the players, not just the fans that go to see them play, but for all of the actors, the government, the private sector, the social sector. And that's the difference between investment and expense. We still need to invest more in female soccer. And finally, the structure that United States has is fascinating. That is what impressed me the most when I lived there. A girl at 5, when she turns 5, she gets a pink ball. And she gets soccer shoes, booties, boots, soccer boots, whatever, shoes. Parents understand that it's healthy, that it's good, that it's recreational, that they have to do sports. They already develop social skills. They play with other boys and girls together in a recreational way. There's they work on fine motor skills and others. It's a first stage where, so at age 5, they introduce girls to sports and football. Then they go to school when they're 7, and in school it's already organized so that females. So there's competitions every weekend, and the girls are training in part of an infrastructure that is healthy for them. They have lockers, they have uniforms, they have people who go and cheer for them. Besides, the Federation of the United States has a very well structured the system of clubs. They have leagues, junior leagues from 7 years up. They play with other girls of their same age every weekend, besides what they do in school. So, okay, I'm wrapping up. Then they go to university, and it's more competitive. They are professionals if they've made it there, and they get scholarships, and they study whatever they want to study. Then they go to the national team with at least 1,500 games, and where they learn to lose, where they learn to win, where they learned about leadership. They learned all the soft skills that sports generate. And obviously, when they play against a South American team where girls start at 13 or 14, if they're lucky, and they've only had 50 or 60 games, then they learn to win and lose. Then obviously there's a huge gap. I want to finish by thanking the CAF for what they did with CONMEBOL. Those are strategic alliances that we need in the region. I want to thank CAF for having done this alliance with CONMEBOL. Thank you. Thank you for this. Thank you, Lorena. Now we will go on to Claudia Palacios, who is with us virtually. Claudia, welcome. You as we said, have been working for over 25 years in the press, in radio, in television, producing, reporting, presenting, everything. You're also an author of books of great social impact. And in your third book, En Brujas, you talked about the life of 83 women in Colombia, including somebody who worked for female votes, women who have become references in the fight in the rights of women. Can you mention some of the common challenges that these women faced in their own lives? Of course, Barbara. Thank you very much to CAF for inviting me. It's a pleasure to share stage with these wonderful women. I greet all of them. I think that what is common to all of the women, to those of us that have surpassed or overcome barriers and have had leadership roles, as well as those that still have not, is the imbalance in the distribution of care. I don't know if it's possible to share something, if you allow me. I'm not unable to share. I would love to show you graphically what this is like so that we can all have a clear picture of what it means when a person has to dedicate 40 hours a week or more to chores, such as taking care of the children, making food, cleaning, the shopping, groceries, logistics of the home. It's very difficult that when a person has that overload, when that is not shared with another person who's responsible and who also benefits of all that, this person who's overloaded it's harder for them. They already have a handicap and they cannot give their 100% in the work area. Many women just leave the workforce and receive a salary, or receive money from their partners, but not because they want it. Many of them do it because it's the best, but they don't study the why they're deciding that. It's social structure, how the labor market works, that is so rigid. And not even with the pandemics, we see the flexibility that we have learned that can happen thanks to virtuality. Many women that leave the labor market don't realize that society has cornered them into a decision that they will later regret and that will make them vulnerable. And that when they want to come back, well, obviously it will be very hard and a bit late. So this is common to many women. Those that are outside labor market live this, understand this. They are vulnerable to the inequalities that can, because they depend on another person. There's violence, there's domestic violence, physical violence, there's even feminist side, but those of us who do not depend on anyone also suffer it with the overload of work that leaves less time to ourselves, to our health, to new projects, to relax, or long-term plans, etc. So this is common to all women, and that is why it is so important that we take it seriously. We take care seriously, and I cheer the initiatives like the one that Gloria was sharing from Dominican Republic and Colombia as well. Here in Bogota, recently there were the care blocks, and I applaud this. I cheered for this, but I feel that as in everything, we have to accelerate this, because if not, many generations will go by on the same issue until finally people can understand that care has a value that we're not paying for, and that it is very important in the well-being of the families, of the society, of having other people in general. The men, it's usually the men who can shine thanks to sacrifice that their partner is doing, because she is taking care of the care. And that has been disguised with euphemisms like, oh, you're the queen of the household, or you're wonderful, you're the super mom, you're the super woman. And frankly, I think that the queen of the home is a trap in which I don't want to be a superwoman, because if I have to be a superwoman, it's because the people that are my partners are not doing what they have to. They're not pulling their weight. And if I have to be the queen of our home, well, I worry, because I wonder what this really entails and how a huge responsibility is not shared. So we first have to understand the value of care and what is care, because today we are falling into, and many women say this with pride, but I encourage you to reflect more about it. Well, I also change the diapers, and I also make the milk bottles, and I drive kids to school. Yeah, but that is part of what should be done, but it's not everything. One of the women that I interviewed for the book there, that was the co-director of the Bank of the Republic, said something like, sure, you take kids to the doctor, but what about the list of what you have to ask the doctor? Is something, yeah, you took the kid to the doctor, but I gave you the list of what is going on with him. I told you exactly when the teeth were breaking, or why the drugs didn't work, or how many times he coughed, or what fever he had. It's not just, okay, I drove the kid to the doctor. It's because the women still has the role, in women, the man is just like an assistant, but the main job is done by the woman. And it's not just that, it's having the initiative, it's understanding. And for that, we have to remove some cultural barriers that have led us to believe that we women are better programmed in our DNA. No, we have learned to take better care of ourselves, because since we are young, we have been understanding this, and young boys are taught that, oh, you don't do that. That's something girls have to take care of, and women have to take care of that, as if those things were not important enough, such as making money. So we have to broaden the spectrum of the definition of care and give the value so that the labor market does not miss out on the talent of so many women on the one hand that are leaving the labor market, and also so that people or society can be more sustainable. Because if that capacity that women have of caring for others and for their well-being, this is so much as this is appreciated, it will be easier for us and for the challenges, and the world will be more sustainable and not just imposing from, we shouldn't have to yell or fight for this always. I mean, that I would stop there. And I don't know, Barbara, if you have the chance to give me the space for the second question, because Women's Day is, I'm leaving one meeting, going to the next and the next and the next, and I have someone breathing down my neck. I have to leave the meeting. Yeah, Claudia, thank you. So we'll start the second round of questions, if you agree. And because you have to go somewhere else. Okay, the second round of questions will be focused on the measures you were mentioning to face the challenges. In that sense, Claudia, thanks to your capacities, have positioned this in the fight against chauvinism. You declare the gender inequality has to be fought towards a change and more equality. It's not enough to just speak about these issues between the ones that are already convinced. So what solutions can be really carried out in the digital area? Not just to sit more men at the table, but to really achieve a change of mentality in what you define as the chauvinism. Well, thank you, Barbara, for mentioning this project. This is a video podcast that I've been doing since last year, where I interview men that are already working in effective gender equality. And the truth is that there are many. I think that there are many men that are already aware of this, that are taking on the role of cultural change, of questioning themselves and allowing them to be questioned. And those men, well, we have to visibilize them, see them because they are there. And we have to be open to their questions once they are part of the conversation, once they see what has been done from the academy, from the projects, the public and private projects. Also, I think that what they question is also good for gender equality, because we cannot talk about equality if it's just one gender that leads the cause. So let me see if I can show you this. No, I can't. Okay, and never mind. I was going to share something, my screen with many of the interviews. And I wanted to share a little bit of something else that I did, since you were asking, how to invite the others, how to connect men, how to get to them with this message that from the beginning is something that nobody understands. Many people resist. And because sadly, feminism has because we are women that hate men, that we don't like to be feminine. Many things that are not true, but it's part of reality. I asked a lot of people in my book if they're feminists or not, and most said no, or that it depends what feminism means, because if feminism is, they all said, you know, the common thing, all of these things, well, then they're not feminists. So about everything that there is a resistance, and that's why I think that in order to be able to connect more people, we have to educate them. And that's why the Muy Machito podcast, and that's why this video podcast is supported by a game that it calls Machistometro. If you go into the muymachito.co, you can do it. It's like Mario Brothers, inspired on Mario Brothers, of course. We're far from that, but we were inspired on it. And at the end of the game says to whoever does it if they are in purgatory, hell, or heaven. It's just a learning tool so we can encourage people to see the podcast and just to question them and ask themselves. But I had already, as you mentioned, the Brujas book, I had already done something else that is at the end of every interview that I will show you. You see at the end of every interview, there's a QR code. If you scan it with your cell phone, you open an audiovisual. You can see the interview, you can read the interview. And there's a page called embrujas.com, in which you can have access to comedy that I created for the conclusions of the book, to take to people. I always say, oh, read this book, or I'll talk to you about the story of 80 women. They'll say that's not with me. But if I say we will share, we'll see a comedy, well, more people say, okay. And then comedy has interactive elements. There's a sort of contest, and there's 7 questions. So every time there's the end of a question, or there's a question, the video stops, and people watching the comedy on their computer have to answer. And then at the end, they'll see if they answered well or wrong. But all of it is fun, because jovial. If not, I think that if it's just arid, we will not be able to move forward. What was done through decrees and laws and Supreme Courts was all very good and nice, but there's a huge road that we've already done. What we have to do now is change daily behaviors, and we can't go around this violently. We have to be smart, and I think that's how we will move faster. Thank you so much, Claudia. Thank you for your comments. And now I have to say goodbye. I'm sorry. I have to leave. I have to go. I'm so sorry to not be able to share with the rest of you. Thank you for this space. It has been a great pleasure to meet you. Thank you. Likewise, thank you so much for your participation. Now, Gloria Reyes, you were elected member of the House of the province of Santo Domingo in 2016. You were the youngest legislator of Congress. You have also been acknowledged with a National Youth Award. But in 2021, there's few women like you in Dominican Republic who have been able to position themselves in the decision-making roles. What public policies and norms or measures do you consider would have to be implemented to continue guaranteeing a bigger equality? Well, I like what was already mentioned, and it is necessary. The idea of rethinking the type of leadership and the professional success is fundamental for all of the transformation of the policies of the political exercise, and also from the perspective of people that have no dependency and no responsibility at home throughout the day. We come from an unequal model where the opportunities for women have been limited. We not only in our structures of society, but inside the political parties, there's still the old policy, and obviously they restrict the leadership of women and managing decision-making roles to transform. But there's something that, and it's like, I want to challenge you here. I want to say that we have to encourage a stronger movement towards parity, towards transformation of the structures, of the norms, of the electoral codes of our countries. As a legislator, as a congresswoman, we use this agenda. We start to see and to understand that equality is rights, it's democracy, it's what is fair, it's what is right. And this has to start with us women, with a stronger network, with working together, not just inside Congresses. One of the most important achievements that we had, one of our big victories, was that the women that are not politicians have to understand that the political decisions has an impact on them. In the feminist side, in the business women sector, in domestic groups, and all the groups of women, we had to understand that the fight is not isolated. It's fundamental that we understand that the strengthening, the supporting, the encouraging the participation of women in these spaces of government, of conferences, of congresses is super important. So with that outlook and understanding, as allies, if we reach the positions, we coordinate. The first step has to be encourage legislation that definitely sees parity as a right, and it can be acknowledged as what is right and what is fair. And then together with this, there has to be efforts in the formation and to encourage women to work in because traditionally these open spaces are not, politics is not so friendly or attractive to women. And something that we have done, especially where I am, is to make visible the participation of women, especially social activism and the transformation of communities. So in this phase, working with local women, and that's where everything starts from there, from what is local. And speaking of parity, and not like an electoral quota, but as a right, and also the formation, I would add the financing issue. How expensive is an electoral campaign right now? how hard is it for a woman who usually doesn't have the most money in politics anyway, because there are limits, even to get a credit in private banking, that we can encourage special legislation to encourage women candidates in politics, because at the end of the day, politics is moved based on these interests. So if we can do that, if those three elements are strengthened in our countries, then we could move forward in the representation and in achieving bigger conquests for women, not just in politics, but also in all of the issues of our women. Thank you so much, Director. Yadira, you have mentioned how big of a role or what your parents taught you. They were both teachers, and your international and local studies. You studied leadership and public policies and languages. What public policies and measures would have to be strengthened from an early age, a cultural transformation towards more equal opportunities between men and women? Well, without a doubt, everything that we have said here, said and heard, we have to bring it down to earth, because theories are all good, but how to apply this to the day-to-day practice, and what steps forward with regards to gender equality do we take, will be very important in the framework of these public policies, not just applying them from the top, but also from the bottom up, from the interactions, daily interactions. A real and effective access to education, real and effective. In the case of the local governments of the coast of Colombia, we almost all have the same characteristics of a very dispersed geography, of a geography that is not connected by land, but by water. Locally, we apply public policies, and it is that all of the children had to have the option of getting to school. So they had to be able to go to school. So we strengthened transport to schools, river transport, so that all our girls could make it to school. So that's one sample of how to strengthen, how to really work with these policies. In the second place, I feel that it's very determinant to transform these academic contents where these social representations, these references are focused in this role of the girls, of the women within, not only within the local framework, but how these women are in the global arena, and why, and also the academic contents, not only from the concept, but also from the physical representation, is fundamental to strengthen this policy within the schools, because from there we create the references, or we imagine, or the little girls imagine what they want to be, or what they want to grow up to be. So if within these contents, and if I look at books to learn, for children to learn to read, and there's always phrases like "mom stays at home," the dad is at work. So all of these representations that children start, so they start creating these roles and start positioning themselves. That is what I consider, in Latin America at least, that we have to move forward and change. Now there's Encanto, this Disney movie that has been very famous, at least in Colombia. And it's because from there, from this movie, they talk about the values of women, of the different ethnic groups that we have, the blacks, indigenous, mestizos. And that's what we have to encourage as a region, so that we can reach those equality levels that we want. Thank you. Thank you very much. Continue with actions and measures with Governor Arabella. Since you took on, as you said, with the first women-elect in Rio Negro, you have shown with concrete actions your clear commitment in reducing the gender gap. In your gender gap and diversity, there's a clear access on this decision-making spaces of the local towns. Could you mention the importance of incorporating this perspective? Specifically, what actions must be taken? Yes, we have shared the gender policy, not only having gender areas in each of the ministries, in each area, in each, even in every state company, but we also founded the gender offices within the local town halls. I was surprised to see that there were no gender offices or areas in many of the local town halls. So from the province, we are creating these offices to strengthen them with training and with special funds to buy, to furnish these offices and for supplies. This is also creating in each of these local governments, there are areas to protect women in situations of violence, something that there weren't, where we have shelters, homes. Same thing with public places, public shelters for children or homes. So all of this is relevant in the public policies, because when we leave, or when we do not do, or when we try to not, or to get away from doing all the care or the chores, nobody does them. Nobody takes over. So we have to wonder, is this important for a better and more equal society? The home chores, are they important? Yeah, we think so. So if we have the opportunity of public policies and investing in infrastructure, as we said here, and I want to highlight that in public infrastructure is not just bridges and roads, it has to be other types of structures, sports, cultural, that will allow us to develop tasks in the community. So this policy of sharing in the town halls and reaching all of the corners, as we mentioned, has allowed us as well to be more aware of what was going on with these peoples. So I am optimistic. I know it's possible. I know we can move forward with public policies, and we have some reflections. I do want to thank CAF for inviting me. I do want to thank the two men that are left here in the room. The rest of us are women, and this speaks highly of what is going on. We speak between ourselves, to ourselves, amongst ourselves. We listen to ourselves. So we have an impact on the reality when we make decisions, and when we're not making decisions, there is no one to see and care for our health and our physical integrity, for the health of a better society for our children, because we care. We want to change the society for the girls and for the boys as well. We care We want to bring men on. We want to add them and not to ignore them. We want to be firm, but we want to be kind. We want to change society. So thank you to the women who are here. Thank you to the ones that are listening virtually, and to the few men who have been kind enough to stay till the end to listen to us. Thank you. Thank you so much, Governor Arabella. And yeah, I hope that I hope there are more men listening online at least. We now go to Malena Gavarini. Nowadays, there's a growing number of state-owned companies of the region that are adding to the global commitment in favor of more equality and guaranteeing the necessary conditions for women to participate in equal opportunities in the labor market. These companies have realized that the gender, they own corporate DNA. It's not only fair, but it's more feasible and efficient. President Malena, thanks to your leadership as president of AICSA in 2021, we launched the gender policy. Could you share what is the business case that you've developed for your company in order to incorporate the gender issues and diversity? And in this sense, what is the most favorable change for women that you can see from your company? Thank you. From the first moment in the company, when I arrived, we had a goal, and it was to change this very male company. So we had several concrete actions. Many have to do with this that we've been talking about. What are the axes towards the road to equality that we've been talking about? I think it's fundamental to work on early education, sexual education for everyone from the first minute. It's fundamental to continue encouraging the work to eradicate making poverty, giving poverty gender, like making obviously care services that are institutionalized, because be careful with forming any space so that our boys and girls can have less social quality of education. And also, since women are, we should not have to end ourselves carrying the load. I mean, what she's saying is that sometimes people want to leave. Women end up taking their children to a daycare. And then when you do just any daycare, and then at that daycare, there are women who are not being well paid. So let's always make sure that when we take our children somewhere else, because because no one else can take care of them, that we're taking them to fair places. And also, we have to eradicate the romanticism. When we're queens or when we're witches, both things make power more remote. And what I mean is power as in a verb. Queens do not govern. And what we want to do is be president. We want to be in Congress. We want to be president of our company, sorry. So I think that we have to deepen the commitment with other women, sustain each other, and to support those that have not made it yet with these barriers. Teach the political methodology. We talk a lot about women, that women cannot negotiate, and of course we can negotiate. If there's something that we learned, who negotiates with the kids, with the boys and girls? It's the moms. We've learned from an early age to negotiate. So I also think that when we make it, we have to use power, the power that we have, what little or what lot of power we have to transform those practices that do not allow us to get to places where we can do things and transform them in concrete actions. That is why when we got to ISA, we started with a program that was old, that was done with the cooperative, and it's a concrete transformation. It's just one example. A female colleague, we'll call her Maria. She started working in that cooperative. She was welcomed by her other peers. And what she did the next month, when she got her first salary, is she left a home where there was a lot of violence against her. So when we talk about economic freedom, when we talk about supporting violent activities with our women, actually we talk about these things, giving them freedom, giving them the freedom to stay or to leave, for them to understand that there's another world free of violence for them. And what we have to do is help each other amongst all of us. From ISA, we started to see the bids, the tenders, and to score the companies that hired women, to score them, give them a higher score if they have or had any policies in place on gender perspective. And for that, we set up the purple seal. We extended all the licenses for maternity, paternity, for adoption, for people who are expecting a child. And we brought into the company the licenses for family care. This means we encourage men to support their daughters and their sons and daughters to school meetings, because many, PTA or go to the doctor, we and the invisible violence, that is when a father does not provide child support. We're working with those people who owe child support, and also for the women who are owed child support. We also work in the prevention of all types of violence, not just violence at work and in institutions, but also those that our female colleagues suffer at home. If not, women, as we have said here, have a double the amount of barriers to overcome to be able to be productive. And I think that it is important to retake something that Arabella said, that the problems of women are not only of women. If we want an equal world, men have to become involved. They have to be there when we talk about what the barriers are to have a better life. And I think that this has to do with us. Feminism cannot be for the elites, for the academy. We have to be able to be understood, because in principle, we cannot replicate the leadership and applying the tools of the patriarchy, because if not, the only thing that we are doing is generate contradictory events that will not lead us anywhere and will not help us or not allow us to transform this world. Thank you so much, President Malena Galmarini. Now, we go to the last part of the second round. Please stay. We will close with this final question. From your experience, and as an entrepreneur of Fundación Paraguaya, and as a coordinator of the scholarships, what What measures should there be to break with this gender stereotypes that we're talking about to for economic growth and professional growth? Well, from my experience working in Fundación Paraguaya, we work with a lot of schools. I want to thank them. I see that there is a lacking in the schools. I hope that all of the schools can have vocational training from an early age. I want girls to understand what their vocation is and why, what their skill sets are, so that they can make a decision based on that, so they can have a better job and they can be more productive, they can be happier, and not so much based on gender. It's a life decision, not just we want them just to be happy and to not because they are not a boy, they cannot do this or that, or the lifestyle, because of family tradition as well. If the mom stayed at home, they don't have to stay at home. If many times they want to follow the family tradition, and we have to teach them that they can break that, because they might have their own vocation. So I would love to see vocational tests at an early age. And going on to the economic area, focus a little bit on the two aspects of quality education. And education. Quality education starts many times where they were talking about teenage pregnancy and many other concepts that are sadly realities that girls have to live through. I think quality starts when we end. We hope to see more girls finish college. And then we went to talk about the opportunities and I want to thank my sister and I started this program with scholarships in the very beginning. Also because as a matter of thanking, as a way of thanking the universe for the opportunities we had. We think we made it there first. So we started the scholarship program, just opening a space for opportunity for other women, for talent. They were, because in the universities of the United States, they do value talent with scholarships. So we made sure for Paraguay, almost $4 million to date, if you add all the scholarships that these Paraguayans received for their talent and for having this space, for decisions and opportunities. How much more could we do? Or how much more could the government do so that sports could have this opportunity? Or if they want to use it as a platform to continue with their profession or whatever they want to do. So in that sense, for us, where we see that many Paraguayans came back well-trained after ending their studies. We have the case of people who left behind sports, but are now working in what they wanted to do. Others came back with a degree, and they continued with sports. We have the case of Olympic athletes that now have a degree from a university in the United States. So it's generating these opportunities for quality education. And also from Fundación Paraguaya, we have to work with women in vulnerable situations. Fundación Paraguaya works with many women in Paraguay. And what we see as something fundamental for the economic independence is training and financial education. And we want them to have access to jobs and another source of income, or a unique source, or to diversify their income so that they can also become independent, financially speaking. We see that 9 out of 10 women reinvest their money in their families, but at least now they have the freedom of choosing. So these two things are, in my opinion, personal opinion, go hand in hand and add to the empowerment of women. Quality education, financial independence, and only one. I want to close by saying that empowering women is empowering 50% of the productive chain of the world. I understand, obviously, this would add to the world economy. So I don't know why we don't all want a better and strengthened economy. So let's encourage the empowerment of women in the region and in the world. Thank you so much, Lorena. Applause to this message. It was very positive, and sadly, we ran out of time. I would have continued to listen. I would have loved to continue listening to you all because it's been very inspiring. On behalf of this diverse group of women, I think that from your workspace, I want to thank you for that because you're highly committed women and you did take action and you did share your experience with us. So you're allowing from wherever you are, from your roles, you're allowing for this cultural transformation. And in terms of policies, thank you very much. Thank you to all of you who are here. Thank you for the virtual panelists as well.
Muchísimas gracias, Bárbara, Gloria, Neila.
Thank you so much to all the wonderful women for their super interesting words. To close this event, we ask Ms. Ana Maria Vallardi to come up for some closing words. I think there is not much to add to these wonderful discussions. I don't think I can add anything. I can only reinforce what they have said. Obviously, we cannot say that in the last 50, 60 years, there was progress. That is a reality. But that advance that we had is not guaranteed. We can always fall back. We can fall back economically. As Veronica said, we can, as is the reality in some of our countries, in the physical autonomy, we failed. Luciana did share the numbers. These numbers are scary. But for those of us that worked with victims know the face of these numbers, and that is very scary. We talk about empowering women, empowering girls, empowering women and girls. The 3 autonomies have to happen, because I am an empowered woman financially, but if I suffer violence at home, I'm not really empowered. If I have physical autonomy, but I do not have an economic autonomy, it's also hard for me to move forward. So I celebrate what was mentioned here, that we do need to have autonomy economically, physically, and in decision making. Our colleagues, our friends, explained shared their life experience. It's not easy. They are opening doors, as Lorena said. We are opening the doors for other women to follow suit, as the governor said. Yes, it's true. It's something that I always said. We sit with women to talk about women and what women can do. But we already know what we want to do. But we need the support of everyone. That is what the CAF strategy mentions. If we really want to transform our society, if we really want the opportunity to get to all of us, this is a challenge of society as a whole. This is a responsibility of society as a whole. There is no... A lot of people say, oh, I won't make a difference, but yes, it does. It does. Every attitude makes a difference. This panel, I think over 1,000 people followed or heard this. Do you think, Governor, Mayor, that people were not inspired by you? And I'm sure they thought, if she made it, maybe I can make it too. And that is important. We don't have to feel that what we say is not enough. Yes, it's good enough. We, all of us here, have privileges. We were able to study, we made it. And so now we have the obligation, morally, of working for those women who stayed behind and who don't have the same rights or didn't have the same opportunities. If not, what kind of a society do we want? All I want to say is that I celebrate this type of meeting. I celebrate, and then we should meet more often. We have technology that allows us to exchange this. And I also celebrate that we are presenting a strategy that does seek to empower women and girls in general. I am convinced that in the brief time, we will have indicators that will say we are on the right track. Thank you so much for coming and staying. Thank you so much, Ms. Ana Maria Bayardi, and Brianna and Barbara for moderating, and also to all of you who took place of both discussions in these fascinating topics today on the International Day of Women. On behalf of CAF, I want to thank everyone who came and stayed till the end, and those that are with us virtually. I want to remind you that if you want to see any of the sessions again, or you missed out on any of them, they will be recorded and you'll be able to find them on the webpage, on our webpage, caf.com, or in our YouTube channels. Thank you very much for staying and have a great day. Salimos del evento.